Chapter 1040. A burly figure emerged from the crowd. Vurosan, the captain of her guards, knelt on one knee and placed a fist on his chest. "I am the Supreme Empress. My dear captain, you know what to do when it comes to traitors like Ravenkays who stand in the way of my great cause." "I know," Vurosan replied firmly, and his figure quickly disappeared in front of the queen. Looking at the green demonic smoke rolling like clouds outside the balcony, the queen's face showed a rare cold expression. "If the great high elves do nothing but open the door and watch my husband arrive, wouldn't that make me, the queen, useless?" At the same time, in the city of Azhara, a dozen lords gathered. Especially the lords of the abyss led by Manaroth, their faces were filled with indignation and resentment. But no matter how indignant they were, they could only keep it to themselves, because the one standing on the balcony of the Mage Tower was the Lord of the Infernal Underworld, personally appointed by Kil Jaden to be in charge of all matters in the Burning Legion before the door was opened. If not for the defeat 2 days ago, perhaps Manaroth could still look for Archimonde and use his connections to fight against the commander of the Infernal Underworld. But failure was unforgivable, especially when an entire vanguard of the Burning Legion was completely wiped out, and even Lord Azeroth, who was in charge of the vanguard, was killed. This was a humiliating failure that the Burning Legion had not experienced for thousands of years. Even Manaroth, the temporary military chief, was to be held accountable, but the Infernal Underworld, who had contributed to the opening of the door, took the opportunity to climb up. Although the lords knew that the commander of the Infernal Underworld was temporary, it was still very displeasing. Duque stood on the balcony, and his sharp Eridar voice was transmitted to the ears of every lord through the amplification magic. "Failure? Why is there a failure? Why would the Burning Legion, which has destroyed countless planets, lose an entire army on a border planet like this? A lord? And the seal on his magic branch was removed? How did this continuous humiliation come about?" Facing Duque's aggressive questioning, the lords who had committed a crime could not help but lower their heads, regardless of whether he was willing or not. The Eridar twins, Manaroth, and the other lords of the abyss did not dare to meet Duque's burning gaze. Wherever Duque looked, they would lower their proud heads. Perhaps, when they found out Duque's true identity, they would be so angry that they would have a heart attack or a cerebral hemorrhage on the spot. But at this moment, these proud soldiers who had been invincible in the universe for thousands of years could only listen to Duque's lecture like obedient children. "Thousands of years of continuous victories have given you meaningless arrogance and underestimation of your enemies. This was a disgrace brought about by carelessness. This was also the shame of the entire Burning Legion. Enough. That's enough, you useless people. From this moment on, all of you will listen to my instructions. Those who disobey will be personally punished by His Majesty Sargeras in the twisting nether for your worthless soul and body." Every Void Lord, be it the Eridar twins or the Lords of the Abyss who had joined the army later, shuddered violently. If it was the boss of a rival, it would be no different from farting. But this time, it was Sargeras who was angry, and the direct superiors of all the demons, Kil, Hidden, and Archimonde, vented their anger at the same time. This was something that no one could bear. Duque pointed outside the city. "There are more than 500,000 inferior creatures who think of themselves as nobles approaching this city. Manaroth, bring all the lords of the abyss to destroy them." Even though he was a little hesitant, Manaroth did not dare to disobey. He immediately answered, "Yes." At this moment, a strange seal started to float above Duque's left palm. It was the rune shield that had been destroyed by Malfurion and controlled the magic branch of the Well of Eternity. Duque cleared his throat and lowered his voice. "My heart aches. The Eridar warlock leader of the army actually told me that it would take at least 2 months to repair this little thing made by this inferior race. Is this the power of the warlock squad that the army is so proud of? How could you tolerate the super mage who wiped out an entire army of ours, and use the power of the Well of Eternity beneath our feet to pour his magic on the heads of the great warriors of the army?" Be it the Gemini or the warlock leader Ganisak, they all lowered their heads in shame and pressed their foreheads heavily against the cold ground. They were not pretending to be ashamed. Be it auras or Queen Sailoress, they were truly ashamed. The magic of the army was more inclined towards attack and destruction. They were not good at this kind of control-type magic. Moreover, the rune shield that had been made by a few Breaking Dawn archmages back then had a level of finesse comparable to the magic of the army. The palm-sized rune shield had more than 1,024 magic formations of various sizes, and each formation was interconnected. The large formations were only the size of the smallest screw, and the small ones could not be seen with the naked eye and could only be sensed with the mind. Moreover, the charm shield was connected to the magic control circuits on the branches. Even if he wanted to build a new controller, it would take him at least a year and a half to figure out the circuits and password locks on the branches. There was no way he could build a new controller. 2 months to rebuild this rune shield that had already been more than 1/3 destroyed by nature magic. This was the answer that Ganisak and the Gemini came up with after studying it for an entire day and bragging to the extreme. However, with the pressure from the 3 big shots of the army above them, the 3 of them did not dare to participate in the slightest and only dared to give a deadline of 2 months. Duque glanced at the 3 shivering Eridar warlock lords and sneered. Ganisak, stay here and help me. As for Auras and Sailoress, go to the outer city of Azhara and watch it for me. Don't let any more rats slip in. The Eridar Gemini trembled and finally accepted the order. A few days ago, they were still noble lords and chief adjutants by Kill Jaden's side. Now, because of a single failure, they were actually sent by Duque to guard the door. This humiliation was truly unforgettable. However, they did not dare to act up. Because of their mistakes, Duque was already being lenient towards them. Of course, demons were all ungrateful fellows. They would definitely write down the 3 words infernal affairs in the little black notebook in their hearts. Duque did not care. He was here to dig a hole. When the day came when he buried the Burning Legion, would he care whether the Burning Legion hated him or not? Duque laughed shamelessly in his heart. Chapter 1041. Malfurion felt that his view of the world was collapsing. He had been captured. Beyond his imagination, as the one who had ruined the Burning Legion's plan, he had already prepared for the worst. In the dark power that had captured him, he had seen how the 2 female demon lords guarding the shield were punished. He had also heard the strange human lord who had captured him say that a vanguard of the Burning Legion had been destroyed because of him. Logically speaking, the Burning Legion should not have let him go after he had caused such a huge amount of damage. Malfurion could not stop thinking to himself, Tyrant, I have finally saved Cadores, at least for the time being. Malfurion believed that he could welcome the end of his soul with a smile. Even if what awaited him on the road ahead was the most terrifying torture. However, there was no torture of any kind, not even a small punishment of the soul. He was like a spectator, imprisoned in a small soul ring on the Lord of the Infernal Realm's finger. Although he clearly heard the strange lord say that he would torture him and force him to reveal the method he had used to sneak into Azhara, he seemed to have been forgotten. The human lord who had defected to the Burning Legion did not pay any attention to him at all. Forgotten? He really hoped that it was true. Very soon, Malfurion discovered that the Infernal Realm was punishing him in the most cruel way in the world. First, the Infernal Realm stuck the soul ring to a metal tube. Only when the image from the outside and the sound from the vibration of the metal tube did he realize the despicable face of Queen Azhara. As the queen who had single-handedly introduced the Burning Legion, she had actually chosen to send an assassin to kill a loyal subject who resisted the destruction of the Burning Legion. Late at night the next day, when Malfurion saw Ravencay's head with a clear expression of disbelief through the soul crystal, Malfurion felt that his world was beginning to collapse. Perhaps this lord who was willing to sacrifice his life and soul for the queen was unwilling to believe until the moment of his death that the captain of the queen's guards would kill him. The assassination of Ravencay's and the leaderless state of the king's army were not the worst. The most terrifying thing was that the shield that Malfurion thought would take months to repair was repaired by the Infernal Realm. Although the force of nature did not completely destroy the magic gear, it was more than 300 years ago that the magic gear was built. A lot of information from back then had been lost in the war. Even Queen Azhara said that it was impossible for her to provide complete information. However, this silent lord of the infernal underworld was as relaxed as if he was playing with mud. In front of several demon lords, he spent only 3 hours to create a brand new runic shield. Malfurion was not an arcanist, but through his soul crystal he could clearly see that there were close to 10 Breaking Dawn mages, including Savis, Eridar, and the twin demons who had injured him. All of them had shocked expressions on their faces. It was a skill far beyond this era. At first, there were only a few mages observing, but later on, even Jaden's will personally came. This lord of the infernal underworld did not stop for even half a second. In order to restore the period of time that several Breaking Dawn archmages had bitterly worked on for several years, ignoring the lack of blueprints and recasting the incomparably intricate multiple control spell formation control system, this human liege used his nimble fingers to tug at close to 100 strands of mana that were thinner than hair, easily accomplishing what so many magic liege had failed to do. The moment Duque finished, Jaden did not even look at him again, nor did he consider whether Duque's newly created runic shield needed to be tested. He simply said, "Well done, infernal underworld. After opening the door, you will receive a reward above your standard." Jaden's will immediately left. Evidently, he had more important things to do. Previously, because the mana of the Well of Eternity had been diverted, the matter of opening the teleportation door could only be put on hold. This directly caused the army fleet waiting in the distorted void to come to a standstill. Now, there had to be a commander to restart the preparations that had been stalled. That commander was definitely not Archimonde, who was in charge of charging and breaking through the enemy lines. Duque, who bowed respectfully to send Jaden off, straightened his body again. In his shadow form, his face outlined a cold and arrogant contour. Tell Manaroth that his enemies will lose the mana that they are so proud of the moment the army attacks. Duke's words were like a death sentence to the king's supporters. In fact, ever since returning to 10,000 years ago, when he had mistakenly entered the distorted void, Duque had been thinking about whether to save these night elves who had endlessly courted death in the ancient war. While the high elves who had led the Burning Legion were not worthy of pity, Duque still gave up on the people who had come to protect the king after much consideration. If Ravencase had successfully rescued Empress Azhara from the Burning Legion, what would have happened? This was originally a topic worth investigating. Unfortunately, Duque was not interested. Duque did not believe that the nobles of the High Elves who were also part of the king's party had not heard any rumors. Deep down, the king's party still pursued endless arcane magic and absolute rule over the continent. However, they belonged to the party that had been abandoned by the Empress. Everything they had done was purely because they were unwilling to be abandoned, and they wanted to fight for power and revenge. War had always required sacrifices. In order to make the Burning Legion suffer, as a human, Duque had no qualms about abandoning Cador, who was not even considered part of the human alliance at this point in time. Moreover, no matter how cruel it was, Duque was only maintaining the original history. Thus, half a day later, Duque unsurprisingly received news that the 500,000 elves had almost been completely defeated. Although it was said to be almost, it was because there were a few experts who surprised the army lords. With their superior individual combat power, they had blocked the attacks of more than 10 lords, including Manaroth, and 100,000 elite demons, giving the remaining elves an incomparably precious half an hour. Lord Sphinx, that mantis shrimp of yours has defected to the enemy. He even killed the Lord of the Abyss, Brugerton, with his own hands, Queen Saloras reported. While ridiculing Grandpa Ho's abyssal lord nemesis Halo in his heart, Best Actor Duke let out a cold laugh. Whatever. Anyway, Lord Archimonde is about to descend. All those who resist on this planet will meet their end. On the 7th day after Malfurion destroyed the rune shield, Duque opened the largest teleportation gate in the history of this world, according to his agreement with Jaden. The commander of the Burning Legion, Archimonde, descended. Chapter 1042. Ever since the Burning Legion began to use the power of the Well of Eternity, the dark water of the well had never been calm. It was in a state of turbulence almost all the time. But it had never been like this, with waves far higher than the ones in the Forbidden Palace. The dark water of the well shot up into the sky, roaring as it clashed and collided with each other, stirring up rings of magical mist. Then lightning flashed, and the sky flashed gold, crimson, and finally faded to the standard yellow-green of dark energy. The sky seemed to have split open, and a huge hole was formed between the torn clouds. Accompanied by the rumbling of thunder, it was as if thousands of stars had fallen from the universe. The ink-like dark light crossed the endless void and descended on the side of the Well of Eternity, on the huge oval-shaped portal that was over 100 meters tall. The surface of the portal, which was originally empty, rippled violently, as if thousands of half-dragons were running wildly on the surface of the mirror, emitting a strong sense of shock and ear-piercing roar. Over 1,000 high elves of various sizes stood not far from the portal under the leadership of the queen. Together with a large number of demonic guards, they lined up in neat rows to welcome the arrival of this important figure of the Burning Legion. The massive magic had caused a drastic change in the weather, and the thoughts of the high elves were like this stormy night. No one knew if they were about to usher in a storm of change or a true destruction. Only Queen Azhara and Savis, with the most excited hearts, looked forward to the next scene. This was the most capable general of the Creator in their hearts. How would they get along with Lord Archimonde? When the ripples on the portal reached the most intense moment, a pair of green-skinned giant hands finally broke through the barrier of space, and a few fingers as thick as horse carriages stretched out from the portal. Soon, a giant taller than the most majestic Forbidden Palace in Azhara stepped out of the portal. The shock that the high elves felt when they first saw Archimonde was indescribable. It was as if they had really seen a god descending, and they all prostrated on the ground, maintaining a kneeling posture, not daring to move. Queen Azhara lifted her lily-like white dress and jogged all the way to Archimonde. She cleared her throat and sang in her incomparably sweet voice. Queen Azhara of Caldorii pays her respects to Lord Archimonde. Originally, the beautiful queen still had a lot to say, but who would have thought that this incomparably mighty and domineering army commander would not even pay attention to the queen? Instead, he turned his head and looked at the black man, who was even smaller than the queen. Infernal affairs? After making the statement that outsiders could not understand, Archimonde ignored everyone and took a step that was dozens of meters long. He stepped on the ruins of the outer city of Azhara, making a loud sound of crushing debris, and left on his own. A gust of cold wind blew. Suddenly, it was very cold. Everyone felt that Queen Azhara's passionate heart had been chilled by Archimonde's arrogance and rudeness, turning into winter snow that was blown away by the gust of wind. What was the meaning of sticking warm noodles to cold buttocks? This was it. They sacrificed their own people and betrayed their own country, and this was the result they got in exchange. Whether it was Queen Azhara or Savis, they all had a look of disbelief on their faces. No, it should be said that they were dumbfounded. At this moment, almost all of the high elves felt that something was wrong. If the Burning Legion, or their god, really valued them, would they behave like this? Would the Creator Sargeras really do as he promised and grant them greater power? Humph! Archimonde, you bastard! One day, you will have your retribution. Looking in the direction that Archimonde had left, Duque, who was cursing in the Eridar language, spat on the ground. Not to mention Queen Azhara, who had recently become overly self-conscious and had started to diligently study the Eridar language, or Savis, who had always been a lapdog. Even the high elves who did not know the Eridar language could easily feel Duque's anger towards Archimonde. It wasn't just Duque. The Eridar twins and the group of Eridar magi were obviously unhappy with Archimonde. Queen Azhara felt that she seemed to have caught on to something. Duque bowed to the queen. Although it was not very formal, it was still a show of respect. Then he spoke in the Caldorii language. My apologies, Your Majesty. Please ignore that brute Archimonde. Although he is the commander of the Burning Legion, he is actually a battle maniac who only knows how to fight and kill. Other than killing and destruction, his brain basically has no capacity for anything else. Of course, he is also the #1 warrior of the Legion. Then you are. Of course we are serving the great and wise Lord Cultivation. Movie King Duque appropriately took a side in front of everyone and showed his respect for Cultivation. Those who were with Archimonde had all left. The ones left here were of course Cultivation's loyal followers. Even in a major battle, the subordinates of the two demon commanders would work together. Working together was one thing, but whether or not they were happy with each other was another matter. How could the intense competition that had lasted for more than 20,000 years be dissolved so easily? Seeing this scene, Queen Azhara subconsciously applied the template of the elves' court struggles to the Burning Legion. Of course, to fool the High Elves, one had to have something concrete. Duque rattled on, speaking at a speed that a newbie would never be able to keep up with, to the Eridar twins beside him. After hearing this, because Duque had opened the door in time, the twins, who had recovered from their state of atonement, showed an expression that said, "You're so bad, but I understand you." The twins returned quickly, twisting their seductive waists as they pushed a cart full of things. However, everything on the cart was covered by a thick black magic cloak, making it impossible to see what was inside. Pushing the cart in front of Queen Azhara, Duque took off the magic cloak and revealed what was underneath. It was a super-high magic crystal that emitted an emerald glow. Each of them was about the size of a 330 milliliters mineral water bottle before Duque traveled to this world, and they were all neatly cut into hexagonal prismatic crystal shapes. Duque took out a scroll from his sleeve and handed it to Sarvis, who was beside Queen Azhara. Duque said with a straight face, "These are the dark energy crystals that Kador has always wanted. As long as you modify your body according to the method on the scroll, you will have the chance to evolve yourself and make your body more adapted to dark energy. Of course, not everyone can adapt to the great dark energy. Inferior beings that cannot adapt will be ruthlessly eliminated." Chapter 1043. What about those who can adapt? Azhara asked. Duque smiled and didn't say anything. A cluster of dark rays shot out from his hand towards a collapsed wizard tower in the outer city. Darkness silently swallowed up everything around it. The entire 5-story wizard tower, along with the broken tiles and debris within a radius of 200 meters, turned into black nothingness in an instant. They were completely erased from this world. A few months ago, I was just a survivor from a border planet that was conquered by the army. Fortunately, with the appreciation of Sololas and Auras, I was able to discover my abilities. Now, I'm a mid-level Void Lord of the Burning Legion. No, you're already a high-level Lord. Caught off guard, Cultivation will descended. Along with the appearance of a huge shadow, his loud voice resounded throughout the entire square. In an instant, all the lords and the high elves who had just gotten up knelt down again. Infernal Affairs, you've done well. The army has always appreciated talented and strong people. And you're their role model. So, from today onwards, you're a high-level lord. The rewards I've promised will definitely be yours. This is the list. Tell either Auras or Saloras after you've made your choice. Cultivation's fiery eyes glanced at Queen Azhara. Azhara, when you cooperate with Infernal Affairs and open the final door to welcome Lord Sargeras, you'll get what you want. Thank you, Lord Cultivation. Azhara bowed deeply. Jaden looked at Duque again. With Azhara City as the center, you'll be responsible for everything within a radius of 300 kilometers. As long as you don't make low-level mistakes like them. After the final door is opened, there will be more rewards. Thank you, Lord. Duque continued to act like a grandson. Infernal Affairs. When will the teleportation door that can allow Lord Sargeras to pass through be built? Building a teleportation door that can allow Lord Archimonde to pass through is already the limit of what I can do now. The Guardian of Planet Azeroth has been alerted. Now that the planet's protective circle has been activated, I can't even teleport you, Sir Cultivation, here before I get rid of the Guardian of this planet. Furthermore, it doesn't seem to be enough to simply use the power of the Well of Eternity. Jaden was not surprised by the answer. Get ready. When there's progress, I want you to open the portal immediately. No problem. Leave it to me, infernal affairs. Suddenly, Kil'jaeden changed the topic and transmitted his voice directly into Duque's spiritual sea. Infernal affairs, you just did a great thing. Archimonde considered Kaldorii to be worthless, and such a clumsy approach was not advisable. That's why you didn't hesitate to use the dark energy gems given to you by the army as a reward for Cadores. I think you did the right thing. Thank you for your understanding, my lord. Inferior beings are destined to be eliminated. A powerful existence that believed in the army must be rewarded. I've already suggested this to Lord Sargeras. Before Kil'jaeden's voice trailed off, Sargeras's will had already descended. Sargeras praised Savis, who was loyal to him, and then forgave Savis for his failure in destroying the runic shield. Finally, he gave Savis the reward he had been dreaming of. My most loyal servant, Savis, I can grant you the power you desire, but this will change your form. Can you accept such a change? It doesn't matter what I become. Please grant me power. Looking at Savis, who was trembling with ecstasy, Duque secretly sighed in his heart. The High Elf's obsession with power had reached a point that a human like him could not understand. Unlike the original history, Savis was killed by Malfurion while he was guarding the runic shield. In this life, because of the Eridar Gemini's intervention, Savis was still alive and kicking. But now, it seemed that he was going to become the first satyr in the history of Azeroth. Queen Azhara's mouth twitched, but she did not stop Savis in the end. Just like that, under the watchful eyes of the High Elves, a yellow-green light passed through the portal and shot onto Savis's body. Sargeras had personally forged a body for Savis, a body with split hooves, unkempt goat legs, goat-like horns, razor-sharp claws, and a long lion's tail. Although Savis did not even manage to guard the precious runic shield, he was the first elf to connect with Sargeras's will in the process of researching the Well of Eternity. As a guide, as a model example of buying a horse's bones with money, Sargeras must have thought that Savis had considerable value, so other than transforming this fellow who was equivalent to a fanatic, he also gave Savis a special power. I confer upon you the ancestor of satyrs. Yes. From that moment on, Savis had the ability to use a demon's curse to turn other creatures into satyrs. This was also the reason for the birth of the second, third, and many more satyrs in history. And the new satyrs could then corrupt the next generation of satyrs, allowing the satyrs to flourish. Savis's new body made Queen Azhara feel a little melancholy. Obviously, this did not conform to the queen's aesthetics. However, this was Savis's own choice, and even she could not say anything. But when the queen saw the fanatical gazes of many high elves staring at Savis, who was bursting with demigod-level magic, the queen suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. That was the displeasure of her power being divided. However, she, who was in a state of leading a wolf into the house, no longer had any right to say no. Time passed quickly. Because Duque opened the portal in advance and brought in the main force of the Archimonde Burning Legion, and because of Krasus's public relations with the dragons fell into a standstill, the elven army was naturally beaten like dogs. After losing Lord Ravencase, the elven aristocrat who succeeded him was scum. In the end, nearly 1 million elves were slaughtered, and their territory fell again and again. At the end of the first month after the Archimonde's arrival, the main city of the elves, Surlama, fell. In the second month, the dragons participated in the war, but at this time, as the guardian of the earth, Nisario rebelled as he did in history. In the name of forging the dragon soul, he directly caused the dragons to bleed. The situation was becoming more and more unfavorable to the native races of Azeroth. In the first battle of the third month, Tyrant Whisperwind, who was exhausted, was captured by Savis. Chapter 1044. The failure of Surama City could not be blamed on the nobles and Tyrant, who were the successors of Ravencase. Ravencase's first victory was an abnormal product, and it could not even be said to be lucky. It was simply a matter of extreme risk to count on when the ultimate weapon in the hands of the enemy would be activated. The power of the Well of Eternity was cut off by Duque, and most of the elven mages died. Furthermore, in order to make up for their first failure, the Burning Legion gathered many times the combat power of the elven army every time they attacked. Manaroth led more than 10 Void Lords to charge together. How could the elves, who did not have that many heroic domain masters, resist? That's right, when Moon Goddess Elun contacted the dragons to support them, the dragons were also unlucky. At this point in time, even though the dragons had the largest number ever since the formation of the dragon army in Azeroth, they had never experienced any large-scale battles. The dragons with some experience were mostly land battles, and they usually went to bully the giants on the ground. They did not have the corresponding aerial combat experience. Even though they had a natural advantage in terms of physical strength, the dragons were at a great disadvantage against the aerial forces of the Apocalypse Guards, which were 10 times their number. There was a huge difference in experience and numbers. As soon as the two sides clashed, the dragons were shot down like turkeys. Tyrande, Illidan, and Ronan, who were watching the battle from the ground, were stunned and did not know what to say. The number of dragons and Apocalypse Guards that fell was about 1 to 2, but the problem was that the Burning Legion had more aerial forces. The Apocalypse Guards covered the sky, and it seemed like there was no end to them. Originally, when the 5 dragon aspects attacked together, they had indeed suppressed the demon army. Their combat power was unparalleled, but ever since the appearance of the almost indomitable super demon Archimonde, the 5 dragon aspects had suffered a setback. Ronan was dumbfounded. Only at this moment did he realize how lucky his group was to defeat Archimonde 10,000 years later. That was because Archimonde had most of his power suppressed. This Archimonde had used the powerful power of the Well of Eternity to directly break through the planet's defense circle and summon his complete form. At his peak, Archaron's was simply an invincible existence. The claws of the 5 dragon aspects could not even leave a deep wound on his body. Even if they scratched a meter-deep wound, it would be perfectly repaired by the power of darkness in the next instant. Of all times, the damn Nethario jumped in the wrong direction. Just like in history, he used the demon soul to trap the dragon race. In his desperation, Krasus was willing to risk changing history to persuade the Red Dragon Queen not to inject her power into the dragon's soul. However, he was not an official member of the dragon race in this time and space, so his advice was ignored. Bad news came one after another. Tyrande, who had exhausted all of her mana on the battlefield, had been captured by the Satyr King Savis. This was undoubtedly a bolt out of the blue for Illidan, who was the only one left. Seeing Illidan's uncertain expression, Ronan finally realized that he had to pull the last force of Azeroth into the fray as soon as possible. He said to Grom and the others, "You guys stay in Fort Raven. I'll go find Cenarius." Originally, it would have been best to let Malfurion, the eldest disciple of Cenarius, negotiate, but Malfurion's soul was trapped. Ronan could only bite the bullet and go. In the city of Azeroth, Duque looked at the huge empty shelf in a daze. Without enough mana to tear open the dimensional barrier reinforced by the planet's magic circle, this portal was destined to be a decoration. However, it was Archimonde's job to deal with the Guardian or plunder enough mana. Du's bad taste kicked in, and he made the portal that was supposed to greet Sargeras into the style of the Dark Portal. The portal that was filled with the evil wind of darkness even gained the appreciation of the twins of Erida. The pair of beautiful demon sisters even hinted that Duque could have a friendly conversation with them at night to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. As an upright and reliable young man, Duque decisively refused. "Oh, that's a pity. Infernal affairs, you clearly exude the scent of a female." Elisa's licked her coquettish lips. "Actually, sometimes I even feel that you're not a part of the Burning Legion. Compared to those violent and barbaric fellows, you're too law-abiding. Although the Legion doesn't mind adding some capable and disciplined strong people," Queen Saloras said pointedly. Duque opened his hands in a serious manner, and 2 extremely pure black flames emerged from his palms. "Sorry, I love power the most. Only power is my ultimate pursuit." No one said that it's bad to pursue power. But other than power, other Eridar warlocks also have their own pursuits, such as, the twins probed faintly, or rather, they were guiding Duque's attention. In fact, Duque had long discovered that a high elf lady was happily chatting with an Eridar warlock in the bushes 100 yards away. Duque knew that he couldn't stay here any longer. Before accomplishing his ultimate goal of tricking the Burning Legion, Duque had to pretend to be a fallen person who yearned for the life of a demon. The problem was that he was too obedient and followed the rules. Previously, Jaden had counted on him to open the door for Archimonde to descend, and the other small details could be ignored. Now that Archimonde had descended, in fact, Duque was no longer a necessary candidate for the Legion in Azeroth. If Duque wanted to carry out his plan, he had to continue to stay in the core position of the Legion. Then he had to think of ways to discredit himself and continue to gain Jaden's trust. It wasn't easy to deceive a demon commander. Duque was already thinking if he should find a chance to go to the front lines and slaughter thousands of night elves. On the other side, the twins were still egging Duque on. Actually, I know that Lord Sargeras doesn't like people like Queen Azhara. That's right. He had a strong taste and liked Garona. If you like, you can totally take that so-called queen, and then use your identity as a high-rank lord to announce that these high elves are your exclusive slave race. Sigh, I haven't even succeeded yet, and I'm already tearing down the plank? Duque shrugged helplessly. It's a pity that I don't like to climb trees, and I don't like to climb a tree with dark purple bark. Auras rolled her eyes. What about her? Duque suddenly saw the figure of the priestess who had pale purple skin and was a little shorter than him. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 1045. Duque was someone who paid attention to the bigger picture. If he did not, he would have been destroyed during the first Dark Portal. Even though he was known as the destroyer of history, he was still trying his best to control the direction of the bigger picture and make Azeroth's situation better. Duque was a very timid person. But it was this kind of person who could always burst out with unimaginable courage when he was forced into a corner, slaying demons and ghosts along the way, even earning himself the title of a great hero. The conflicted Duque was, of course, very clear about the current situation. If he did not get rid of the Burning Legion during the War of the Ancients, or if he was exposed and died here, then everything would be over. If he did not get rid of the Burning Legion, Azeroth would be a land of death in 10,000 years. At the same time, Nosdorm would definitely be killed now, not 10,000 years later. If he died here, even if the outcome of the War of the Ancients was the same, it would be meaningless. Thus, preserving himself and maintaining the original outcome of the War of the Ancients were parallel and not conflicting. Duque never thought of himself as a saint who was compassionate and wanted to save all the innocent in the world. Thus, people and things that went against these 2 points could be sacrificed when necessary. Even if millions of elves had died since the start of the War of the Ancients, he did not have any psychological burden. To Duque, this was no different from when he commanded the Alliance's soldiers on the battlefield during the War of the Dark Portal and World War II. But when he saw Tyrande, this old comrade, Duque felt his balls ache. Just a second ago, he had used the excuse of not wanting to climb a tree to reject Gemini's probing. The next second, Tyrande, what was the meaning of this? Even if he was unjustly attacked, this was not the way to lie down. This was like a beautiful back flip 10 times and then a 3,600-degree flip to the side to hit the muzzle of a gun. Do you want me to slap myself in the face and pretend to be gay? Do you believe that Gemini will immediately find a few strong and handsome men to trick me? Moreover, with a female demon like Gemini, it was obvious whether Tyrande had entered Duque's aesthetic range or not. At this moment, Duque suddenly entered a huge crisis that concerned his life and the survival of his soul. As long as he took a single wrong step, he would immediately be consigned to eternal damnation. Of course, as a traitor, he could immediately kill his way out of Azhara City and return to the Night Elf's side. However, if that were to happen, how would he be able to continue with the act of an egg pretending to rebel? If he rebelled and the Burning Legion didn't believe Illidan and killed him, then this show wouldn't be able to continue. Duque swallowed his saliva. Gemini immediately understood what Seiji meant. Aura's eyes were like silk. No wonder our Lord of the Infernal Affairs doesn't like ordinary goods. Queen Solola's even came closer and blew a breath of hot air on Duque's neck. A high priest of the indigenous gods. This is indeed something that those coquettish bitches can't compare to. Infernal affairs, good eyes. What else could he say in the face of such unreliable likes from the Eridar twins? The only thing he could do in the spiritual world was to put on his signature 45-degree tearful pose. Actually, you guys don't understand my heart. I am innocent. I'm just a lowly and cowardly university animal. Which one of you will give me a yellow river? I want to wash away the stain on my name as the Duke of Beasts. Savis, who had become the Satyr King, strode into the hall with a few high elves who had voluntarily become satyrs. The unconscious tyrant, who was being carried by the back of her collar and swinging around like a puppet, not only attracted the attention of Duque and the others, but also the other Void Lords. Yo, Savis, looks like you brought back a good toy. A Lord of Morgar walked towards Savis. Morgar was a one-story tall humanoid demon. At first glance, it looked like an extremely burly humanoid fatty. Upon closer inspection, one would notice that it had a thick and deformed arm, as well as a huge foot with only 2 sharp toes. Savis frowned when he saw the newcomer, especially when he saw the skulls of the night elf priestesses tied around his waist that were filled with fear and malevolent expressions. Barbaro. This is the high priest of the moon goddess Ilun, Tyrant Whisperwind. Savis seemed to emphasize. So what? I love torturing and killing the priestesses of the indigenous gods. Although many of them are still calling out their god's name until the last moment of their lives, most of them crumble when they see me torturing and killing their companions. They pray that I won't hurt them. But evidently, the row of heads was the result of those who begged for mercy. Yo, Infernal, aren't you going to snatch that priestess? Once she falls into Barbaro's hands, she'll be gone soon. Queen Saloras incited Duque. At this moment, something unexpected happened. Perhaps it was Barbaro's foul breath that woke Tyrant up. Tyrant retaliated the moment she woke up. An unsuccessful counterattack. Savis, who was still carrying Tyrant, defeated her counterattack with a single spell. Originally, Barbaro should have grabbed Tyrant and pierced her body with his claws. But at this moment, a miracle happened. Tranquil moonlight suddenly shone from Tyrant's body, forming billions of tiny white runes that wrapped around her like a white veil. As the Lord of Morgar, Barbaro's deformed and thick arms could easily crush a dwarven steam tank into dough. However, his claws could not penetrate the 5 centimeters of space on Tyrant's body. It was a miraculous layer of absolute protection. What power is this? In a fit of rage, Barbaro grabbed Tyrant's petite body and flung her away. Tyrant was thrown into a daze. This time, it wasn't just Duque. Even the other lords were interested in Tyrant. There were more than 10 lords in this hall. Most of them had just been teleported here and were still waiting for orders to go to the front lines. They all gathered and began to attack Tyrant with all sorts of methods. It was obvious that Ilun was displaying her miracles to these barbaric void lords. The lords could seal Tyrant's attack power and even knock her unconscious, but they could not truly harm or torture her. The lords howled, but there was nothing they could do. This made Duque secretly heave a sigh of relief. According to the original history, the demon lords, who were at their wits' end, could only imprison Tyrant. Then, there was the legendary scene of Tyrant's escape. Suddenly, Elisa's sneered. You useless things. Since you can't deal with her, then scram. Saloras put a hand on Duque's shoulder. Oh, infernal affairs, as long as you nod, we can help you deal with this tyrant. Duque spat out a mouthful of blood. Damn it. Chapter 1046. The other lords have already given up on healing. What are you doing here, Gemini? Scram to the side. If Tyrant managed to escape in 2 days, everything would be fine. Duque really wanted to give Gemini a few slaps. Just then, Duque suddenly thought of another problem. This seemed to be his fault. Without Duque stirring up trouble within the Burning Legion, Gemini would not have come to Azhara. Also, because he had many subordinates, in order to temporarily stabilize the High Elves, he ended up giving the High Elves a large number of demonic crystals. Now, the Queen and her subordinates were deeply grateful to the Burning Legion. In history, once the Archerons descended, the entire Legion ignored the High Elves who had lost their value. If he remembered correctly, it should be Kael, that's grandfather, Das Rima Sunstrider, who felt abandoned by the Burning Legion and chose to turn to the light. He released Tyrant, which led to Tyrant's miraculous return. Coupled with the fact that Goddess Elune had endorsed Tyrant and publicly praised her for her steadfastness, the Arcane faction had been eliminated and most of the Nature faction's demigods had knelt down. This was how Tyrant, as the High Priestess, was able to rise to power. Alright, it's all a mess now. Even if Goddess Elune protected Tyrant, no one would be able to release Tyrant. Just as Duque was thinking, the female demon Elises came up to add fuel to the fire. Oh, infernal affairs. Do you like this woman? Say something for us, sisters. Seeing that he could not avoid it, Duque decided to show off. His domineering gaze swept across the place as he sneered softly. Since no one can handle it, then let Gemini handle it. Most of the people here were mid-level or low-level lords. With Duque, a high-level void lord, speaking of course, they did not dare to have any objections. At this time, Queen Saloras smirked. By the way, Your Excellency, this is a private matter. Duque firmly believed that Elune would definitely protect Tyrant, so he did not hesitate to show off to the end. He elegantly turned around and walked away. As he left, he said, "Hee hee." It was obvious that unless the 3 heavyweights of the Burning Legion took action, no one would be able to do anything to this woman. Well, 2,000 top-grade demonic crystals, I bet you can't handle it. If you really can't do anything to her, just throw her into the highest-level prison and lock her up for now. On the other side, Tyrant was being tormented by the group of Void Dukes. However, she stubbornly stood up and glared at Duque's back. She did not understand the language of Eridar, but she instinctively felt that this group of evil and violent lords were using her as a wager. A pair of purple and a pair of crimson Eridar demon hooves stood in front of Tyrant. Tyrant raised her head and looked at the 2 beautiful faces filled with mockery and malice. She felt like vomiting. Nosdormo estimated that even if he forced himself to resist, he wouldn't be able to last until the Ancient War. Nosdormo sighed, and suddenly spat out a small dragon's breath in front of him. After that, the giant Time Dragon King seemed to be pulled by something, and was suddenly pulled back to the door of darkness 15 years ago. This strange dragon's breath, which was like a small flying arrow, easily passed through thousands of blurry scenes and everything in the world. It suddenly passed through the barrier of time and space, and silently appeared behind Duque. Originally, the situation in the next moment should have been the gathering of a large amount of time power, continuously attacking Duque's senses. Nosdormu would never know that in order to prevent Duque from being frightened or confused, he had set up a few more mental barriers. All inquiries had to be filtered by the system ELF before reaching Duque's senses. In the end, Duque had no idea what was going on. At this moment, Duque was shocked to find that the door to his bedroom had been pushed open. Tyrant, who was wearing a long white nightgown, flashed in. There was no trace of moon god power on her body. Duque was dumbfounded. Chapter 1047. The Burning Legion was not going to be easy. Duque knew this from the first day he crossed over to the world of Azeroth. Duke's balls ached as he looked at the system's highlighted red outline on his retina. The Eridar Gemini was hiding in a house 100 meters away. Their devil horns and hooves were clearly outlined, and Duke's balls ached. This was the Gemini's test, and also Kill Jaden's test. A person who did not know how to conquer, destroy, or kill, no matter how strong he was, could not be given such a heavy responsibility. If Duque dared to escape with Tyrant now, Archimonde might come back with a group of Lords of the Abyss in the next moment. The moonlight was as calm as water, flowing on Tyrant's body. However, it was as if flowing water had hit an invisible barrier, and the moonlight was repelled. Duque was stunned. This was not because Elun refused to bless Tyrant, but because Tyrant was using her own will to resist Elun's power entering her body. Tyrant's nightgown was not tied with a rope. She was purely using her left hand to pull the left hem over the right. It was this half-naked action that made Duque's mouth dry up. Duque could not deny that he was actually a fan of elves. This was evident from the fact that he had 3 high elves in his house. As for Tyrant, who had been imagined by countless players as a doujinshi, Duque did have a slight desire in his heart. Originally, there would not have been anything, but in the shadow form, especially when the dark energy in his body was not converted for a long time. Duque was stunned to discover that his body had a kind of restless feeling. This feeling was not good. It was the temptation of darkness. Duque secretly took a deep breath, then pretended to be ignorant. Why don't you let your goddess protect you? Tyrant, who had been silent all this while, suddenly erupted like a volcano. Her eyebrows furrowed, and an expression of anger appeared on her face. Demon, what are you pretending for? You were the one who instructed those 2 damned female demons to bring me to the twisting nether and threaten me with the safety of over 100 of my sisters. Are you still going to pretend to be innocent here? All right. As you wish. I'm here. Tyrant was obviously gritting her teeth in anger, but as she spoke, her aura weakened. Her originally fierce steps became soft and small, and she finally knelt in front of Duque. 2 streams of tears rolled down Tyrant's beautiful face. She sobbed uncontrollably. As long as you promise to let my sisters go and not kill them, I will fulfill my promise and become your possession. Duque's teeth hurt. His balls hurt. His head hurt. His entire body hurt. He finally understood what Gemini had done. Elun was indeed amazing. She was actually able to protect Tyrant in the midst of the enemy's formation. But in history, it was only preserved because there were no intelligent demons like the Gemini twins. Gemini had broken Elun's seemingly invincible protection with just a little trick. They used a portal to bring Tyrant back to the twisting nether. Of course, Elun's power could not reach the twisting nether. As a result, they used a large amount of dark energy to wash away the protective barrier on Tyrant's body. The moment the barrier was broken, Tyrant's final trump card was shattered mercilessly. Needless to say, Gemini was very good at playing with people's hearts. They could have used violence to make Tyrant submit, but they chose a more effective method, taking hostages. The priestesses of Elun were like sisters, and that was how the famous Elun sisterhood came to be. Since that was the case, everything became simple. In fact, Gemini could have made Tyrant submit completely. But they were afraid that Duque would lose interest, and that was how things turned out. Duque knew that there was no way to resolve this matter peacefully. He frowned and flicked his left hand. 2 dark rays pierced through the wall and shot at Gemini, who was hiding 100 meters away. The attack was vicious, but there was a smile on his face. Hey, it's not polite to peek. Can you 2 please stay away from me? Duque did not intend to kill, and Gemini took it as a friendly invitation to leave. Gemini's bewitching giggles resounded in the night sky. This caused Tyrant's expression to change again. At this moment, sitting on a luxurious 3-seater sofa, the dark energy around Duque's body expanded, forming a huge black fog. Duque said in a deep voice, "Since you have sworn to become my possession, then come over." Tyrant's body trembled, and the tears in her eyes flowed even more. In the end, she stood up slowly, as if she had made up her mind to fall into the abyss, and stepped into the black fog. Unexpectedly, she was caught the moment she stepped in, and sat on Duque's lap. "Tyrant, you've met Roddick and the others, right? I'm Roddick's teacher." Tyrant's body trembled again. She never would have thought that the spellcaster that Roddick spoke of, who was hiding within the Burning Legion, was actually such a high-ranking Void Lord, the future star of the Burning Legion, the spellcaster. You? Impossible. Tyrant's eyes widened. I also hoped that I wouldn't run into you. But the commander of the Burning Legion, Cultivation, has already started to suspect me. Duque could be considered a straightforward person, and he explained in detail that he had mistakenly entered the twisting nether and was caught as a test subject. In the end, he was modified by dark energy and became a lord, aside from the fact that he and his group had transmigrated 10,000 years later. Duque told Tyrande everything about himself and his plans. Tyrande was so shocked that she could not close her mouth. This sounded like a fantasy story. Spellcaster, you said that you purposely infiltrated the enemy camp to destroy the Burning Legion's main force, and then waited for the dragon aspects, Dragon Soul, to cooperate with you to blow up the portal and destroy the Burning Legion's main force? Tyrande could not keep up with Duque's train of thought. In the end, she was stunned by Duque's huge and crazy plan. You've been to the Twisting Nether, and the Aradar twins should have shown you how huge the Burning Legion's fleet is, and how many demons there are, right? Tyrande recalled the countless dark-powered starships in the sky, and then the demonic army that filled every single one of them, and she shuddered. She could not help but nod. There are too many demons. If we just let the Azeroth race fight them, they won't be able to kill them all even if they die 100 times. And as long as the demons don't die in the Twisting Nether, they can be resurrected infinitely. My plan is to destroy the Burning Legion's main force once and for all. But there's a precondition. Tyrande's voice trembled as she continued, you can't be exposed. Make your choice. I can give you a chance to contact Elune. If you choose to leave, I will take you with me. It all depends on who will complete my plan. Of course, you can also choose to make a sacrifice. Chapter 1048. Tyrande was dumbfounded. If not for the fact that millions of her brethren had been slaughtered by demons, she would not have been so sad and angry. If not for the fact that she could not resist the spread of evil, she would not have been captured and sent here. If not for the fact that she had seen with her own eyes how huge the Burning Legion's fleet was, she would not have felt so afraid. Perhaps Duque had given her a choice, but Duque, who did not feel the reality of the elves being slaughtered, did not realize that Tyrande was actually forced into a dead end. Suddenly, Tyrande's body stopped trembling, and her eyes that were starting to lose focus became determined again. She did not turn back and just sat on Duque's lap and said, "Can you pray for me one last time? I want to report what happened to you to Goddess Elune." The black fog that enveloped the two dispersed. Tyrande walked slowly towards the window with graceful steps. There, a large cluster of pure white moonlight illuminated a large piece of marble floor, making it look as if it was daytime. Gently taking off his nightgown, Duque, who was sitting on the sofa, saw a bewitching figure. The priestess began her prayer devoutly. Looking from behind, the towering peaks of Hyjal were actually wrapped around by two small golden snakes that emitted a demonic aura. The top of the snake's head was holding the small protruding stump of the world tree in its mouth. Duque suddenly felt that the dark energy in his heart seemed to be restless. The moonlight was incomparably gentle and beautiful. The pure and beautiful moonlight formed a sharp contrast with this perfect and seductive female figure. The prayer did not continue for long. Tyrande turned back, revealing a beautiful face that was either crying or smiling. If one ignored the faint purple capillaries on her fair face, Duque suddenly realized that she really did look a little like the Windrunner sisters. The same determination, the same love for their brethren, and the same willingness to sacrifice themselves. Tyrande turned around without a word, and once again stepped into Duque's black fog, allowing the black fog to envelop her. She knew that this was because Duque had blocked all probing from the outside world. Duque's voice was dry. What did Elune say? Tyrande sat down beside Duque, not bothering to hide the bitterness on her face. She said, "I'm sorry, my child." Duque slapped his forehead. Damn it. He was speechless towards Elune. But if it was Elune, perhaps she had no other choice. There had been too many sacrifices, and no one knew how much more they would have to pay to see the dawn of victory. In the face of a terrifying enemy like the Burning Legion, a priestess was nothing. Duque turned around and looked at Tyrande with a pained expression. At this moment, he finally understood why Tyrande hated him so much when they first met 10,000 years later. It was because he had returned to the ancient war and caused such a mess. If he was tyrant, he would also hate him for 10,000 years. However, this fallacy was also a pain in the ass. Duque, who had been in the Dark Portal for 15 years, had returned to the ancient war and offended Tyrant 10,000 years ago. In the end, Tyrant had taken revenge 10,000 years later. Thinking of how much Tyrant hated him at that point in time, Duque decided to go all out. Holding 2 Mount Hyjal, Duque spouted nonsense with a straight face. Everything is for the sake of destroying the Burning Legion, for the sake of victory. So, I'm sorry. Tyrant clenched her teeth, and her cheeks were almost bleeding. She nodded heavily. I have long since sworn to give everything I have to Elune. Since this is the will of the goddess, I have no regrets. All right, Miss Offering, please accept this terrifying combo from another world. Invented by Mr. Jean and brought to glory by Lord Wei, the godly technique, picking up girls. Sob sob, 10 minutes later. Please accept this invincible technique from Dongying from another world. Ito 48 hands. Duque had been fine at first, but the problem was that Duque's illness had flared up. For no reason at all, the 7 major sins, which had not flared up for more than 10 years, suddenly flared up. Which one was it? Make a guess. If you guess wrong, it's my loss. Tyrant felt bitter on the spot. She had been shot. It was like a little girl who believed in the existence of Santa Claus had suddenly been fed more than 10 terabytes of action movies by a bad guy. Even though priestesses had regenerative abilities that surpassed priests, Tyrant Whisperwind. Unfortunately, tragedy still befell her. The next morning, Duque, who had finally broken free from the 7 major sins state, could not find any words to describe this tragic battlefield. Wait, I need some quiet time. All right, fortunately, no one here would ask who quiet time was. Just as Duque assumed the pose of the thinker, a pair of eyes filled with anger, fear, humiliation, obedience, resignation, and other incomparably complex emotions met his. For a moment, Duque almost thought that he would have to endure 100 starfall attacks. But in the end, it was Tyrant who silently helped Duque put on his clothes. Seeing that Duque was still shrouded by the black fog, Tyrant pretended to be very docile as she hugged Duque from behind. The two of them were pressed together, and with her still tear-stained face, she said something that did not match her expression at all. Don't lie to me. Otherwise, even if I die, my goddess and my sisters will hunt you down to the ends of the universe. Duque took a deep breath. I will definitely do my best to destroy the main force of the Burning Legion. At the very least, these demons will not be able to invade Azeroth for the next 10,000 years. I will remember your vow. Tyrant's expression was as gentle as water, but she was actually gritting her teeth as she spoke. At first, Tyrant had wanted to pretend to be a tamed slave and follow Duque out. Unfortunately, the moment she stood up, she immediately knelt down. She was so ashamed that she wanted to die. She tried to use the holy light to heal herself before continuing. The problem was that there was a kind of pain that was called residual pain. She could only give up. Duque sighed and walked out of the hall. As expected, he saw Eridar's Gemini with a mocking expression. Ha! Not bad, infernal affairs. We really did not misjudge you. Facing the Gemini's, you know what I mean, expression, Duque's face was full of righteousness, as if he did not understand what they were saying. The more Duque behaved like this, the more the Gemini believed that Duque had fallen. At this moment, outside of Azeroth, a knight wearing a hood and riding a Shadowmaw panther approached the city walls. The hellhounds that were wandering outside the city were easily sucked dry by him. He almost killed his way all the way to the front of the city wall. A gate that had been strengthened with magic blocked him. The night elf guards who were loyal to the queen were glaring at him with their heads lowered. He walked forward and took off his hood. He was the famous Illidan Stormrage. I am here to serve my queen, Illidan shouted. He was obviously not shouting at the guards. He was shouting at someone in the palace, I am here to serve my queen and the leader of the Burning Legion. Chapter 1049. That day, Duque was a little bored. As the person in charge of the Burning Legion in Azhara, Duque needed to ensure that the forward operating base of Azhara would not fall. As for the portal that Salas always used, it was just a decoration. Everyone knew that before killing the dragon aspect or obtaining a stronger source of magic, it could not be opened. Hidden did not rush Duque, and he was happy to be at ease. After browsing through the battle reports of the Burning Legion's higher-ups on the magic mirror that could transmit information, Duque yawned. Basically, all paths were swept away, and there was no resistance at all. Only the northwest side of Old Kalimdor near Mount Hyjal, the Burning Legion was stuck in a quagmire of resistance. This was because a large number of demigods in Azeroth had made their move. They tried to counterattack the Legion, consciously avoiding Archimonde and only targeting the other legions on the flanks. The Burning Legion lost a few lords and returned to the Twisting Nether. Archimonde was furious, and sent a few of the more capable lords who were on standby in Azhara to the front lines. But this had nothing to do with Duque. The queen invited me to watch a dance? Duque tilted his head when he received the message from the 3 elven maids. Initially, Duque did not want to go, but Duque did not want to go back to his palace, because he did not know how to face Tyrant. After some thought, Duque agreed. After handing over some trivial matters to the Gemini, Duque went to the queen's palace. Azhara was obviously surprised that Duque had agreed to watch the dance. After all, Duque had been using work as an excuse to avoid the invitations of the High Elves. For a period of time, Azhara almost thought that Duque was a stubborn demon who was extremely self-disciplined and difficult to deal with. With Archimonde's arrival and the supply of high-purity demonic crystals to the High Elves, as well as the news she received last night, Azhara's view of Duque had changed. Before Sargers arrived, her dream of becoming the Demon Queen was temporarily over. The commander of the army, Archimonde, was also a typical warrior, a boorish man. Azhara, who could not find any connections, seemed to want to invest more in Duque. Duque saw through this but did not point it out. After all, Queen Azhara was not a good person. Invest. Just invest as much as you want. In any case, regardless of whether I succeed or fail, you will suffer a loss. If I can't make you die, consider it my loss. Duque made up his mind. If Azhara dared to throw a sugar-coated bullet at him, then he would eat the sugar and send the bullet flying back. After some small talk, Duque sat on the sofa beside Queen Azhara's lounge chair. With a look from Queen, the band next to her immediately started playing. Unlike the pure and natural Night Elves' music, the High Elves' music could be said to be decadent. Angels had the fairest skin, while demons had the most voluptuous bodies. The seductress had 2 great advantages, and that seductive dance was enough to arouse the interest of any man in the world. Looking at the elven girl who was already kneeling between his legs and secretly showing off her beauty, and looking at him with an expectant gaze, Duque's balls ached. He, who was still in a state of back pain, was powerless. "You're not bad. Did Her Majesty say anything to you?" Duque's lips curled into a smile. "From today onwards, I'm the possession of Lord Infernal Affairs." The girl was trembling a little. Her eyes were filled with passion and fear. She was afraid that Duque would reject her. She couldn't imagine that she had committed such a great sin and had to change her body. Her skin had become fair, and it was impossible for her to change back. Just like her compatriots who had become satyrs, this transformation was irreversible. If she still wasn't accepted by Duque, she didn't dare to imagine what would happen to her when she returned. The queen had never been a truly benevolent ruler. "All right, you'll follow me." Chapter 1050. The girl's face revealed an expression of boundless joy. This was not an act, but a genuine expression of joy. Looking at the girl's eyes that were filled with confusion, uneasiness, and fear, turned into the current peace and hope, Duque wondered if he had really fallen, turning his head and accepting a gift. "What's your name?" "Daoist." Unexpectedly, the girl did not answer him. Instead, she took 2 steps back and knelt down. "Master, please bestow me a name." I'm asking you what's your name? Duque was a little embarrassed. No one treats me as a high elf anymore. My old name has already lost its meaning. So please bestow me a name, master. Duque asked a few times, but the girl still refused to answer. Duke was also discouraged. He could not bring anyone from this era with him, so he thought to himself, all right, I'll just leave her with Tyrant later. After all, everything I'm doing now is just a temporary measure to numb the enemy. Celia. Yes, from now on, you'll be called Celia Ubatilia. Duque's bad taste kicked in. The girl happily accepted. She placed her hands on her shoulders and bowed to Duque. From now on, I'm only yours, Celia Ubatilia. Come here. The shadowy Duque stretched out a black finger and gently slid it down from Celia's shoulder. As the girl trembled slightly, his fingertips slid across her collarbone, through the canyon, and landed near her navel. Even though she was embarrassed, the girl still quietly endured the slight uneasiness and fear in her heart. I didn't expect your aptitude to be top-notch. To be honest, Duque was quite surprised. He had thought that Queen Azhara would throw a sugar-coated bullet at him, and that she would at most be a charming vase. But upon inspection, he realized that this was a completely undeveloped piece of virgin land. Don't get the wrong idea. He was talking about the aptitude of the girl now called Celia. Although she was not very powerful now, her bones, muscles, and magic circuits that had yet to fully take shape all had top-notch potential. It was only a matter of time before she entered the realm of heroes. The rarest thing was that, like most of the Moon Guards, she cultivated both magic and martial arts. He leaned towards agility, but deep down he was still an intelligent hero. Who is she? Another tragic character who was buried in the long river of history, unable to become a hero? Duque sighed in his heart. Speaking of which, the ancient era was also an era where heroes came forth in large numbers. Think about it, Doraima Sunstrider, who founded the Kuel Salis kingdom, was now an unremarkable existence among the elven nobles. His awkward radiant moon strength left him in a dilemma. Celia, who was praised by Duque, was slightly happy, but she didn't dare to be arrogant. Master, please take pity on me. Pity? As long as you pay your eternal loyalty to me, I will. Duque stood up and allowed her to follow behind him. I'm not interested today. Take care of Tyrant first. Celia's eyes flashed with unwillingness. She was sent by the Empress. Who would have thought that she would have to serve a captive, a slave-like existence? However, she adjusted her attitude very well. She was already dead in the past. Now, she had to hold onto Duque's thigh tightly. When Duque returned to his side palace, Tyrant was furious. She cursed in her heart, Du Kong, you bastard. You just took me last night, and now you're going out for a change. She knew that she didn't love this man, but she couldn't help but get angry. Du Kong had been implicated. Last night, during the intense battle, Duque had followed history and called himself Du Kong to Tyrant. And now, unbeknownst to Du Kong had been implicated. Weinzigdu's coffin couldn't hold on any longer. Duque had no idea. Master of the infernal tunnel, she is? Tyrant pretended to be calm as she asked. Celia, the dancer that Queen Azhara gave me. However, she's now my maid. From today onwards, she will serve you. Celia came up and bowed respectfully. Tyrant's eyes twitched, and she felt a sense of relief. It seems like this bastard still cares about my feelings. Tyrant, endure. You have to endure. All of this was a personal sacrifice for the sake of destroying the Burning Legion. As long as they could destroy those demons, they would be able to avenge their comrades. Furthermore, this was something that even Ilun had agreed to. This was the will of the goddess. A woman's thoughts were very subtle. In a situation like this, Tyrant unconsciously treated Duque as her greatest support. At the same time, her righteousness drove her to do all sorts of things that she didn't want to do. This was especially so when Duque brought back an elven girl who was as beautiful as her. This made Tyrant feel even more threatened. After a night of interaction, she had a deep understanding of the two sides of Duque. At this moment, Duque's will was undoubtedly good. However, In order to hide in the Burning Legion, he had no choice but to keep a large amount of dark energy in his body. Even if this was for the sake of a noble goal, she found that the darkness was still quietly devouring Duque's soul. This was a very bad sign. If Duque really fell, she would also be consigned to eternal damnation. What was more terrifying was that it could lead to the destruction of the world of Azeroth. Glancing at the elven girl called Celia, Tyrant shyly approached Duque and whispered into his ear, "I will try to like you during this period of time." Bastard! Duque smiled bitterly. Of course, during this period of time, was referring to the Burning Legion's destruction. Fine, you can do whatever you want. A pure white dress wrapped around Tyrant's well-built and voluptuous body. She did not twist her waist or strut around in a lotus position. Just the way Tyrant walked naturally to the center of the palace gave off a strange sense of holiness. She gently took off her boots, revealing a pair of long legs that could easily rival most human women in seconds before Duque's eyes. In the next moment, the solemn priestess aura disappeared. What was left was a never-before-seen charm that only a mature woman could have. It was a strange scene. Without any accompaniment, Tyrant danced elegantly and gracefully, her body moving up and down. She displayed her energy and passion to her heart's content, but the way she looked at Duque was incomparably complicated. Resentment, faint hatred, and a hint of submission. Unknowingly, the song ended. Duque had already carried Tyrant to the sofa and started groping her to his heart's content. Tyrant had no choice but to give in. She closed her eyes but did not resist Duque's advances. At this moment, Gemini's voice suddenly came from the entrance of the palace. "Oh, infernal emissary, let me introduce you to a strong Caldorii who has joined the army, Illidan's Storm Rage." When Tyrant's eyes met the familiar amber eyes, Tyrant felt as if the world was ending. Chapter 1051. Time seemed to have stopped. At that moment, Tyrant could no longer be described as sexy or seductive. On that priestess face, there was confusion and pain, but the redness was the main theme. Tyrant gave in and allowed Duque to do as he pleased. Everyone could see the two black claws digging deep into her white dress from the entrance of the hall. This beautiful face that seemed to have sunk into depravity was simply captivating at this moment. It was so captivating that one wouldn't even want their own life. Of course, this was only for neutral males. For Illidan, who was deeply in love with Tyrant, this was like a bolt from the blue. All kinds of scenes from when he was young to now, the little things that happened unknowingly, and the warm and ambiguous scenes all appeared in front of him. Idiot! My future partner will definitely be an indomitable hero. I'm ignoring you. Fragments of Tyrant's voice from thousands of years ago rang in his ears. The words of a child, a teenager, and a young man rang in Illidan's ears. In his trance, he even had the illusion that it was deafening. The shocking scene in front of him made him dizzy, and he could not open his eyes. What made him collapse the most was that he saw his own image on this human-shaped demon that was filled with dark energy. It was as if he saw himself, Illidan's Storm Rage, who was enjoying his beloved Tyrant, and not the high-tier Void Lord Infernal Lord that the twins of Eridar had introduced to him with a wicked smile. For a moment, he almost wanted to pull out the two warblades of Azeroth on his back and kill this bastard who dared to defile the goddess of his heart. He really wanted to. Fury erupted from the depths of his soul like a volcanic eruption. In an instant, it filled his limbs and bones, seeping into every blood vessel and every cell. He wanted to explode. The anger in his chest swelled to the point of explosion, and he was on the verge of exploding. On the other side, seeing the change in Illidan's expression, Duque knew that things were going to go south. In the original history, it was Illidan who sacrificed himself and pretended to defect to the enemy in exchange for that rare opportunity. That scene definitely did not include Tyrant being robbed. Perhaps he had prepared himself mentally before coming here, or perhaps he was prepared to sell himself in exchange for Tyrant, who should still be under the protection of Elune. According to the script of history, with Sardra's appreciation, he might really be able to do it. Unfortunately, everything was a mess. Because of Duque's transmigration and the arrival of Gemini. For Illidan, the test was more than twice as difficult. The system elf clearly marked that Kill Jaden's will had quietly arrived. He attached a very faint trace of his divine sense to auras and observed the side hall. Not only was he observing Illidan, but he was also observing Duque. Kill Jaden thought that he had done it very secretly, but he could not escape the soul scan of the system elf. Duque knew that the biggest test had come. As long as he passed this test, he would be able to completely control the portal and work with Illidan to destroy the Burning Legion. If he couldn't pass, everything would be over. Suddenly, he couldn't help but laugh bitterly in his heart. Spying really wasn't that fun. Since ancient times, many undercover police officers had lost themselves after completing their undercover mission. Years of being behind the enemy lines had completely changed their habits. Other than waking up every morning and telling themselves, "I'm a soldier, not a thief," there was no one who could help them. In fact, after completing their mission, most undercover officers ended up in a miserable state. Being undercover for years was a small matter. Many of them were forced to become addicted to drugs. Even if they quit, they could no longer be police officers. The bitterness of being undercover. Who knew? Duque looked up 90 degrees to the sky in his heart, and 2 streams of crocodile tears flowed down. *CK. Don't blame me. If you want to blame someone, blame that bastard Nozdorma. He could have just thrown me into the Grey Valley in the future. I will definitely do my best to wave the flag and cheer for everyone in every battle. I will be the most outstanding hooligan and survive the ancient war. But he threw me into the twisting nether and almost killed me. I was just trying to protect myself. It's the demons who forced me. It's the goddess of fate who teased us. It's this shameless world that didn't give me a way out. At this moment, even Duque had no choice but to give up. Tyrande was thin-skinned after all. Her first reaction was to escape from reality. She couldn't accept that she had just decided to cooperate with Du Kang, and immediately her despicable behavior was seen by her childhood sweetheart who loved her deeply. It was a blasphemy against her hazy love. It was the collapse of her entire world. She screamed, "Don't look at me!" She turned her head and struggled to get up from Duque's body. Duque made a decision. "You don't deserve to look at my woman? How domineering. Come on." Duque directly used his ultimate skill. Mind Blast, that was 100 times stronger than before, was instantly released. The invisible, formless, and powerful psychic attack crossed 10 meters and landed on Illidan's body. Illidan, who had never seen such a strange attack, was caught off guard. His agility did not help him, and the instincts that he had trained for thousands of years did not help him. His strong, steel-like body was sent flying just like that. Crackle! He miserably rolled on the ground a dozen times before his dust-covered body stopped in the deep ravine he had created. Logically speaking, as an agility-type hero, he shouldn't be so weak. But Mind Blast was never a simple dark element attack. Illidan saw every moment of his life in the spiritual illusion, from when he was born to when he died of old age. If it wasn't for the fact that the image in the illusion was exactly the same as when his body was twisted, he might have been a little more spirited. He used all his strength to try to prevent his world, mainly the real world, from falling into a state of chaos. But that was all. He wanted to get up and scream to the sky to express his pain and depression. But at this moment, he finally came to his senses and remembered his mission and mission. Yes. I came here to pretend to join them and then find a way to destroy the entire Burning Legion. Wasn't I already mentally prepared to endure and endure everything? Why did I lose my composure when I saw Tyrande? I had to take back Tyrande. I had to endure for the future of my people. Illidan bit his lips until they bled, but he pretended to vomit blood. He knelt on the ground and shouted, "I'm so sorry. Great Lord Infernal Affairs. I shouldn't have peeked at your belongings. Please give me the heaviest punishment." Chapter 1052. The situation in front of him gave Duque a headache. He was terrified. He was terrified. Although he knew that Illidan was pretending, Illidan was still terrified. This was something that countless players could not do back then. He deserved to die, and he was unrepentant. This was the impression that most old players had of Illidan. Perhaps in the later versions, Illidan would be cleared. But until Duque transmigrated, Illidan was that miserable, pitiful, and hateful guy. Regardless of whether he was redeemed in the later versions, one thing was for sure. In the end, he never got tyrant. Mysticism could not save the innocent, and money could not change one's fate. This was the case for black people like Illidan. Even mysticism could not save this African chief. Even if he went to the goddess of fate to buy money, he could not take away any of the cups and cutlery on his bitter coffee table of fate. So after thinking for a while, Duque decided to let Illidan be black all the way. Tyrande, whose power was sealed, did not have much strength. Although she struggled hard, Duque still grabbed her slender and flexible waist tightly, displaying the aura that an evil Void Lord should have. The surrounding air was quickly dyed black, and the surging and overbearing dark power instantly became the only main melody within a radius of a few hundred meters. Duque's power was so amazing that not only Illidan, but even the Eridar twins beside Duque were a little surprised. "You're Illidan, right? Do you like Tyrande?" Duque's lips curled into an extremely evil sneer. It was a sneer that would kill at the slightest disagreement. It was a sneer that looked down on all things and the gods. Illidan had killed 2 demon lords before, but he had never seen such an unfathomable and terrifying existence like Duque. Under this terrifying pressure that had materialized, bean-sized beads of cold sweat appeared on his forehead. Tyrande, who was tightly held by Duque, was also frightened and did not dare to move anymore. She was afraid. It wasn't an act, it was real fear. She naturally knew about Duque's grand plan, but no one had promised her that for the sake of destroying the Burning Legion, they would not crush those who stood in the way of this grand plan, even if these were the childhood friends she valued the most. In order to save this world, both she and the moon goddess Elun were doing their best. Even if she prayed to Elun, Elun would definitely not support her and ruin this great plan of destruction in order to protect her childhood sweetheart. Tyrande felt as if she had fallen into an icy abyss. "No. Infernal affairs. I beg you, don't hurt Illidan. He's my childhood friend. That's all. He didn't mean to offend you. He's already kneeling." Tyrande trembled. Duque didn't want to be such an evil person. The problem was that Jaden was watching. If they jumped back to the loyal ministers now, not only would they all be finished, they wouldn't even be able to escape. In fact, he was crying in his heart. On the surface, Best Actor Duque's gaze was sharp. "Oh, that's good. Didn't you swear to give your all to me? Prove it to me. Show him." This time, Tyrande felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She looked at Illidan one last time and accepted her fate in despair. "I'm doing this to save Caldorii, save Azeroth. Forgive me, Illidan." Watching Tyrande slowly offer her lips and allow the black figure to desecrate her body, Illidan's face was full of bitterness. His mouth tasted like sh*t. He didn't know why things had turned out this way, but the grievance and anger in his heart almost burned his brain. In the end, Illidan could only deeply bow his head. Duque was also very annoyed. For the first time in his life, he had become a great evil person. Even when he was unwilling, he wished that director Nosdormu would suddenly jump out and yell for the camera to stop. What happened to the cut? What happened to the reshoot? Nosdormu, come out and die. I'm not going to act anymore. Duque had tears in his heart, but he had no choice but to continue acting. As if savoring the sweetness on his lips, he smacked his lips and laughed maniacally. Haha, do you see this? Illidan's storm rage. This is power. Only power is everything. As long as you have power, you can obtain anything you want. For example, women. For example, reputation. For example, conquest. So what if you're not satisfied? So what if you're angry? You want your lover back? You can beat me first. I don't dare. I don't dare. Illidan deeply bowed his head. Ha! You don't dare? You just don't dare to say it out loud, right? Duque laughed coldly. I really don't dare. Illidan's head was even lower, completely sticking to the rubble on the ground. His forehead hurt from laughing so hard that it hurt. Suddenly, all the pressure vanished into thin air. The cold smile on Duque's face did not change. It doesn't matter. In the face of absolute power, all lies and disobedience are just fleeting clouds. I don't care if you're sincerely convinced or not. I'll still say the same thing. If you have the power, take it yourself. If you don't, then kneel down and lick my boots. Maybe when I'm in a good mood and tired of playing with your tyrant, I'll give it to you. Illidan's body trembled. Was it shock? Anger? No one knew. Maybe it was both. At this time, Duque looked at the Eridar twins who had been watching the show. Enough of you. Don't try to test me in the future. I'm not as good-tempered as you think I am. Yes, sorry. The twins laughed sinisterly. Duque said, since he claimed to be here to join the Queen and serve our leader, then let's report this to His Majesty. Then let's report it to His Majesty Sargeras. Maybe His Majesty will like it. After all, he's the first person on this planet to join our side after the war. The twins nodded. Duque could clearly feel Illidan's resentment, but he didn't care. As long as Illidan could get the demon's soul, he didn't care if Illidan lived or died. Duque really didn't want to care about what would happen in 10,000 years. As long as he crippled the Burning Legion, he didn't care if there was another Illidan in 10,000 years. You've angered me. Believe it or not, I'll really join the Burning Legion. With that, Duque brought Tyrande back to the side hall. When Silegia obediently closed the door for Duque, Duque's actions suddenly became rough. What are you doing? Kill. Jaden was watching them from afar. Tyra knew that. She also knew her mission, but her feelings were still rejecting Duque. The next moment, she was shocked to see the darkness in Duque's eyes. It was obvious that if she continued to resist, the darkness might really devour Duque's rationality. Tyrande finally realized the danger. If she continued to provoke Duque's negative emotions, perhaps Duque would become a Void Lord before they could complete their plan. Sigh. Tyrande sighed softly. She used herself as a sacrifice and quietly devoured all the sharpness of Duque's godly sword. Chapter 1053. Tyrande Whisperwind was jolted awake from her nightmare. She had forgotten most of what had happened in the dream. What she could remember was that the moon goddess, Elune, had been embroiled in a terrible war. Her mount had been fatally wounded and flung her off its body. Her head had hit the ground heavily. Then she had been captured by that terrifying Savis. She could still remember some terrifying scenes and sounds. A monster that looked like a goat had been eyeing her menacingly. A pair of furry hands with sharp claws had been grabbing onto her tightly. Then she had woken up in shock. That pair of narrow and elegant silver eyes swept around the gorgeous side hall. She had seen this gorgeous room where she had been placed under house arrest countless times. The afternoon sun shone in from the west. This was supposed to be the elves' resting time. Her soft lips parted slightly, and she let out a soft sigh, lamenting her current situation. She shook her head. Her dark blue hair fluttered like waves, and a few strands of silver hair were rather conspicuous at this moment. She propped herself up from her prone position, and the silky blanket slid down her body. Suddenly seeing the battle scars on her beautiful body, she could not help but blush. She really wanted to ignore the black figure beside her, but unfortunately, the man who was sleeping soundly in the shadow state was her true master. This man who called himself Du Kong had always shown her the Burning Legion's battle reports without a care in the world. He had even publicly announced to the Eridar twins that this was part of his training to break her willpower. Tyrande wanted to deny that these battle reports were true, but the few times she tried to contact Elune under Du Kang's watch, she was met with silence. All Elune could give her was meaningless consolation and urging her to carry out her plan. Du Kang had even tried to contact Malfurion's soul, which had always been blocked. In the end, Malfurion had also made her believe in Du Kang. Tyrande was afraid that she would not be able to hold on any longer. She did not know when the so-called plan would succeed. She only knew that she was sinking step by step, even if it was in the name of justice and righteousness. The beautiful memories of her childhood and teenage years were fading away, and the members of the Alun sisterhood were beginning to fade from her mind. Her entire spiritual world was filled with this man's endless tricks and schemes. She had fought, cried, and begged for forgiveness. What scared her the most was that she was starting to get used to this role that she once thought was terrible. Even if she was tormented miserably, her mind would still be filled with that black figure when she turned around. If he left for a while, she would quickly miss him and look forward to his next visit. Unknowingly, 30 days had passed. Tyron was shocked to discover that the luckiest thing between a man and a woman was to have the person you loved love you, while the luckier thing was to have someone who loved you but you did not love him. But now, she had fallen into a third way that she thought she would never accept, getting used to each other. In just a month, she had completely gotten used to his presence. It was as if she was eating and drinking. Have I fallen? Tyron held her face in her hands. Suddenly, Duque's voice was heard. No. This was just a nightmare. The dream will eventually wake up. However, whether what is unfolding before your eyes is a return to the ordinary daily life, or a reality that is even crueler than a nightmare, depends on our efforts. Tyron felt a sudden surge of warmth. How ironic. Just as she was about to break down and become a toy without any sense of self, it was the fellow who had been forcing her that pulled her back. Tyron bit her lip hard. She could not help but let her imagination run wild. If he really used this method to save the Cadores, how should I face him in the future? Bringing Tyron with him, Duque walked towards the southernmost tower of Azhara's palace. The tower shone with the light of magical energy. Thanks to Duque's perfect adjustments, the High Elves did not have to work day and night like they did in history. Along the way, Tyron saw the High Elves and the evil long-horned monsters taking turns to salute them on the way to the tower. The High Elves wore green hooded robes embroidered with intricate patterns, while the monsters' lower bodies resembled the bodies of goats. They used to be Night Elves, but now they belonged to the Burning Legion. Yes, they were satyrs. In the huge hall at the top of the tower, the satyrs and the High Elves struggled to maintain the magic within the hexagon formation. On top of the complicated magic formation that Duque had personally engraved, a ball of flame floated in the air. There was a ball of flame floating in midair. In the middle of the flame was a black hole. This black hole seemed to never disappear. The moment Duque brought Tyron into the hall, she knew that she had entered the territory of the leader of the Burning Legion, Sargeras. There, the Lord of the Abyss, Manaroth, and Eridar Gemini had already arrived. Be it the Apocalypse guards around the hall, they all looked at the white-robed Tyron with mocking eyes. These mocking gazes made Tyron feel ashamed. The Gemini even gave Duque a thumbs up. Thanks to Duque's extremely pure spatial magic, Sargeras no longer had to forcefully descend his will. His power could pass through the huge portal at any time and appear in this world. The only flaw was that the portal was still not large and sturdy enough to allow Sargeras to pass through. Can I come in? A voice that made Tyron's body tremble came from the entrance of the hall. Duque nodded. Manaroth immediately roared, "Come in!" If not for Duque and Tyron, Illidan would undoubtedly be the smallest. This time, Illidan was obviously prepared for anything. Even when he saw Duque, he could still greet him in a formal manner. However, no one knew what was going on in his amber eyes. Tyron looked at Illidan, her mouth twitching, but she did not say anything. No one made things difficult for Illidan, because he was the main character today. The deep portals suddenly fluctuated, and in the next second, a mysterious power suddenly filled the hall. This mysterious power came from the distorted void in the distance. Sargeras's huge shadow suddenly filled the huge hall that was more than 30 meters tall. His booming voice rang out immediately after. "You're Illidan's Storm Rage, the one who proved your loyalty to the army, the one who could do what others could not?" Illidan bowed his head deeply to show his respect. "That's me. As a mortal, you are very powerful." Sargeras spoke from another world. After a moment of silence, he said, But your strength is worthless in my eyes, Illidan said coldly. Perhaps I can make His Majesty descend upon Azeroth. Chapter 1054. The hall fell into silence once again. As the minutes passed, Manaroth became restless. He had never seen Sargeras so quiet. Sargeras finally opened his mouth. Let's hear it. Illidan raised his left hand. An illusion of something appeared in his palm. The demons were a little disappointed. Illidan had only shown an ordinary golden disc. This traitorous mage went straight to the point. This is my method, soul of the dragon. Every demon overlord's expression turned cold. This was especially so for Manaroth. He had personally witnessed its violence and felt its immense power. Relying on this divine weapon, the Dark Dragon King easily wiped out an entire elite demon army of tens of thousands of demons. Even the surrounding night elves that were twice the number were affected. The Deathwing, Nisario, stirred up chaos in this world, and even chased the other dragons away when they tried to stop him. It turned out that everything originated from this inconspicuous disc. Although His Majesty has never descended into this world, I'm sure you've seen its power. Illidan continued. You definitely want to take it for yourself. Yes. Sargeras was honest. But you never thought that it could help you come to this world, right? Illidan's voice was full of temptation. Sargeras didn't answer this time. Silence was the answer. Manaroth snorted. Illidan was no doubt shrewd, cunning, and selfish. The Burning Legion had long coveted this artifact, but it had always been in the hands of the Black Dragon King. When the demons could finally gather their strength to hunt down this fallen dragon aspect, they missed the opportunity because they were busy dealing with Illidan's kin. Infernal Portal, what do you think? The leader of the Burning Legion suddenly turned to ask Duque. Your understanding of teleportation magic surpasses all the warlocks in the Legion. Duque bowed humbly. There's no doubt that it has the power to open a portal. If it's ours. In less than a second, Duque changed the topic. He stared at Illidan maliciously and said in a serious tone, but if the power of the dragon's soul is too great and not controlled well, it may blow up the portal and even the entire well of eternity. This second was so long that Tyrande and Illidan felt like they had been tortured for a century. Illidan was terrified. How could his crazy plan be seen through by this terrifying lord who stole his lover? Tyrande fell into despair. Dukang, have you really fallen? You're actually so considerate of the Burning Legion? It was as if Tyrande could foresee her hopeless future. Watching his compatriots being annihilated, watching his beloved forest being burned to the ground. No, not just the forest, perhaps the entire planet Azeroth would be destroyed. Almost as soon as Duque finished speaking, the Eridar twins and even Sargeras nodded slightly. Manaroth couldn't wait to laugh. He was looking forward to Sargeras punishing Illidan, because this skinny elf was obviously up to no good. Just as everything was about to be decided, Duque changed the topic again. Of course. If that dragon soul is really that powerful, I strongly suggest that we upgrade the usage of this thing. Upgrade? Sargeras was surprised. Duque raised his two fists. A one-way portal will never be stable enough. The more powerful the being, the more power is needed to pass through the portal. My lord, think about it. If only Azeroth has the power of the Well of Eternity and the Dragon's Soul, and the Twisted Nether has nothing, would it be balanced? Your suggestion is, it's best if the type of magic on both sides of the portal is the same. Since Azeroth needs the Well of Eternity and the power of the Dragon's Soul, then we can build a bigger and better portal in the Twisted Nether to correspond with it. If we succeed, the Burning Legion will invade other planets in the future, and that new portal will also be useful. When Duque said this, the eyes of all the demons lit up. Duke continued, before we open the largest portal, we can try to see if we can bring the giant dragon's soul through the portal, or we can directly transfer part of the giant dragon's soul's power to the warped void portal. Duke began to narrate the plan he had come up with on the spot. All the demon lords, including Sargeras, were mesmerized by the story. That's right. As early as 10,000 years ago, The Burning Legion already had interstellar battleships. Doesn't it sound very classy? It felt like using a laser weapon to beat a primitive man with a stone axe. Was it a one-sided beating? That was wrong. The Burning Legion was actually a bunch of idiots who only knew how to use a small portion of the functions of the interstellar battleships. Duque secretly asked, and it turned out that those interstellar battleships were actually stolen by Sargeras from the Pantheon. Unfortunately, Sargeras' original body was full of combat talent and had no talent in science and technology at all. As a result, a large number of high-tech battleships were used as landing ships. The most common way for the Burning Legion to use interstellar battleships was to directly aim the bow of the battleship at the ground, stick it into the earth like a fallen tree, and use the battleship as a landing ship while blasting the Earth's crust. Or, in an extremely tasteless manner, they opened the portal of the battleship and used it as a landing portal after landing. Then, nothing. The fools of the present had not figured out how to use the demonic cannons that ruled the Azeroth 10,000 years later. Well, Sargeras was illiterate. Naturally, it made the demons below miserable. Jaden was extremely smart, but he was a schemer, not an inventor, and definitely not a time traveler. He didn't have the ability to invent a whole set of scientific theories from scratch, especially physics and space theory. After all, this group of guys was too violent and didn't want to improve. They would kill all creatures of the opposite sex at the drop of a hat. Where would there be so many scientists to study and figure out how to use interstellar battleships? The upper and middle levels were like this, and the guys below were not much better. In the end, the entire Burning Legion became an amusing amalgamation of both high technology and primitive abilities. Now there was Duque, the cultured, proven capable and loyal great hoodwinker who said to them, "I'm well read, I won't lie to you." From top to bottom, they all believed him and unanimously approved Duque's Mjolnir portal plan. After the discussion, Sargeras turned to Illidan. "Well, how are you going to offer me the soul of the dragon?" Chapter 1055. Illidan mysteriously took out a black scale. The scale exuded a violent aura, and everyone immediately thought of the cunning Black Dragon King. "I can easily find Nisario." Illidan was extremely determined. Sargeras seemed very happy. "All right, you will be rewarded as a reward for your loyalty to me. However, this will require you to pay a small price." Illidan looked up. For the first time, a trace of unease flashed across his slender face. "My lord Sargeras, it is already my honor to have you personally come to Azeroth. I don't need anyone to help me, is that so?" "I insist." Sargeras let out a mocking laugh, displaying the temperamental nature of a demon king. Suddenly, two dark green flames shot out of the portal with a whoosh. The flames were so bright, it was as if two suns had shot out of the darkness at the same time. When Duque turned his head, he used a shadow to block Tyron's eyes. The Void Dukes also dodged or blocked the attack. Only Illidan had nowhere to run. He couldn't dodge Sargeras' spell at all. The flames leaped into his eyes. His eyeballs, one of the weakest organs in the body, suddenly felt a terrible burning sensation. "Ah, no!" Illidan screamed in pain. His scream spread throughout the hall and even outside the huge palace. There was no longer any trace of arrogance left on his face, only pain, extreme pain, as if his soul was being burned to ashes. Tyron didn't dare to look. She trembled in fear and desperately covered her mouth, subconsciously looking for comfort. She threw herself onto Duque's back. She thought she would hate this action, but she didn't. Unfortunately, she didn't. She hid behind Duque like a pair of lovers. If Illidan still had the luxury of time, he would be furious. Unfortunately, he didn't have the time to care about others. Everyone in the hall watched in surprise as the flames in Illidan's eyes burned brighter and brighter. Sargeras' terrible power pulled on Illidan, forcing him to be tied to a cross and tortured. He opened his arms, his feet off the ground, and his whole body was pulled into the air and bent backward. It was as if in the next moment, this incomparably famous hero would be broken like a matchstick. Illidan's eyeballs were burned to ashes in the first instant, but the flames did not extinguish. The flames fueled by evil magic continued to burn into his eye sockets. When the raging flames burned away the last trace of blood and flesh in the eye sockets, the flames suddenly extinguished. Illidan collapsed on the solid stone floor like a dead dog. Even though he could still feel the lingering pain in his nerves, he was still in so much pain that he wished he was dead. All of his arrogant expression had disappeared. At this time, Sargeras' voice sounded again. "My loyal servant." Illidan obediently lifted his head. His eyes had already disappeared, leaving only 2 empty eye sockets on his face. Only a few wisps of green smoke lingered in the eye sockets like ghosts, neither slowly disappearing nor becoming fiercer. "From now on, your vision is now my vision, Night Elf. The Infernal Seer doesn't trust you, and I agree with him. But from now on, I think I can start to trust you." Illidan didn't make a sound. Obviously, the great pain made it impossible for him to maintain his focus. But Duque could clearly feel Illidan's hatred. The hatred of stealing his lover. The hatred of destroying his eyes. No matter which one it was enough to make Duque's hatred in Illidan's heart forever. Sure enough, every big boss level demon could be easily fooled. Even though Sargeras had begun to believe in Duque's plan, he still refused to hand over such an important matter to a certain existence. Provoking the hatred between the two would ensure that the two would never be of one mind. This was checks and balances. This was the Demon King's way of controlling his subordinates. Good scheme. Good plan. If Duque wasn't a veteran transmigrator who had transmigrated twice, he would probably be tricked when Illidan tricked the Burning Legion. As for Sargeras' precautions, Duque only wanted to say, "Huh." However, it was useless. Time passed day by day. There weren't many surprises. The only one that could be called an accident was the rebellion of Dasrima Sunstrider. This grandfather of Kale, that was very smart. He noticed that when Sargeras' will could easily descend, the Burning Legion's attitude towards the High Elves didn't change. The last batch of demonic crystals was just a personal gift from a high-grade lord. This obviously meant that the Burning Legion had never really valued the High Elves. Dasrima hated the disgusting appearance of satyrs. As a true noble, a wise man who was good at thinking, he began to realize that what Queen Azhara said should be an empty promise. He had wanted to leave Azhara's camp for a long time, but he didn't have a good proof of allegiance until he accidentally found the soul of the demigod Cenarius's eldest disciple imprisoned in a small soul crystal. And that was the side hall where Duque lived. Recently, Duque was busy with the mysterious Mjolnir project. He and the Gemini rarely returned to the side hall. The eldest disciple of Cenarius and the high priestess of the moon goddess. This will be a very good gift. Dasrima thought and did so. In the end, the founding ancestor of the Sunstrider almost lost his life in the city of Azhara. The dancer Seleka, whom he thought he could easily knock out, was unexpectedly strong. It took Dasrima a lot of effort to subdue her. He thought that since he had saved Tyrande in the name of righteousness, the high priestess of the moon god would immediately follow him. In the end, Tyrande screamed as she took out a spellslayer bow and shot at him, almost nailing him to the wall. The only lucky thing was that he still managed to get his hands on the soul crystal. He broke it immediately and released Malfurion. In the end, he activated the teleportation before the demon guards arrived. It was a teleportation that took up to 10 seconds to cast. He found that he couldn't understand what Tyrande was thinking. After he released Malfurion, Tyrande shrank into a corner of the side hall. She didn't attack him, nor did she follow him. With no other choice, Dasrima could only run away before the teleportation channel in Azhara was sealed. When Duque returned, Tyrande threw herself into Duque's arms and whispered, "Promise me, end this as soon as possible. I'm going crazy. No matter who succeeds, end it quickly." Duque said in a low voice, "Okay." Chapter 1056. At the Mount Hyjal defense line in the northwest of the continent, the Burning Legion launched a new wave of attacks. The night elves who were on the defensive needed sleep and food to replenish their energy, but this became their weakness. The demons didn't need this. They could fight day and night tirelessly until they died on the battlefield. They would only retreat and stop fighting when they were at an absolute disadvantage. Even if they retreated, they would quickly return and soak every inch of land in blood. This time, the demons realized that their opponent's strength had increased greatly. Now, the night elves were no longer fighting alone. They had more troops in the battle. The Taurens, dwarves, and other races were like charcoal in a snowstorm, greatly increasing the strength of the defending army. This was also the first time the Burning Legion had suffered a defeat. The demons retreated step by step, and they were less than a night's journey away from the destroyed Surama city. Although they had won many battles recently, Malfurion, who had returned to the allied army, couldn't be happy. This wasn't just because his home Surama had been destroyed beyond recognition by the various battles. His unease came from the new strength in his army. As the leader of the allied army, Distel Starry Eyes, an idiot who had climbed to the position of commander-in-chief after Ravenkay's death, was Malfurion's greatest source of worry. As someone who had experienced the first and second battle of the Dark Portal, the Battle of the Dalagen, the Battle of Mount Hyjal, and many other battles, Luo Ning couldn't help but sigh. Compared to Duque, Distel's commanding ability wasn't even a fraction of Duque's. Duque could combine different races, troops with different weapons, and even armies with different levels of technology into an orderly whole, unleashing the greatest power. Even the logistical supplies that most of the allied commanders didn't know how to do were organized. From killing the orcs, to defeating the Scourge army, to taking care of the Burning Legion's demons, the allied army really hadn't suffered any losses. However, the Night Elves didn't truly join forces with other races to fight alongside them. Distel arranged his soldiers to the left and center of the army, while the other races were arranged to the right. The different races rarely interacted and didn't affect each other at all. If this could still be considered an alliance, then such an alliance was destined to fail. Those demons would constantly replenish their strength and launch even more ferocious attacks, often aiming at the intersection of the various races with incomparable ruthlessness. The only bright spot was that this new alliance had a large number of powerhouses. Almost every time, they relied on their strength to turn the tide. Brock suddenly leapt up, his movements smooth and fluid. It didn't seem like something a bulky body like him should be able to do. The gray-haired orc brandished the two-handed greatsword that used to be the blade of natural disaster and was now called the blade of judgment as he charged into the enemy formation. Brock let out a wild roar and swung his greatsword, easily slicing 5 demon guards in half at the waist. With a kick, he pushed the still trembling body onto the back of the evil demon. Of course, the fiercer one was still Lord Ho. This number 1 orc warrior swung the blood howl that was also famous at this point in time, carving out a path of blood. In an instant, 20 to 30 demons were sent flying. Some were dead, some were turned into spare parts, and some were on the verge of dying. It didn't matter if you were a small demon pawn or a low-rank demon lord, none of them were a match for Lord Ho. Hellhound? One chop. Doomguard? One chop. Lord of the Abyss? And it was A.F. King Chop. Before Lord Ho's strength was exhausted, there was no demon that Lord Ho couldn't kill. Lord Ho was ferocious. The only problem was that Lord Ho's explosive fighting style consumed too much energy. Luo Ning had to get someone to pull Lord Ho back to rest once every hour. Thus, Lord Ho had a new nickname in the Alliance army, 1 Hour God of War. With Malfurion's return, he naturally shouldered the heavy responsibility of recovering his mana. The group of heroes could unleash their full strength. The siblings, Maev Shadowsong and Jared Shadowsong, weaved through the enemy formation at high speed. Maev's crescent blade easily set off waves of blade whirlwind among the demons, sending flying knives to the enemy's vitals. As usual, Luo Ning used his powerful arcane magic to suppress the Eridar warlocks. However, the one who killed the most warlocks wasn't him, but the elusive Vanessa. With the support of her luxurious top-grade equipment that blinded everyone, Vanessa often used backstab from the back of a warlock, followed by slice, combo, and cut the warlock into minced meat. There was no need for her to use a 5-star, eviscerate, or other ultimate skill. It seemed inconspicuous, but when the results of the battle were tallied, Vanessa threw out a bunch of warlock staffs. Every big boss in the Alliance army was dumbfounded. Even though the demons fell one after another, new enemies kept surging in from behind. The Night Elves' battle line began to shrink as if they had been hit by a hammer. They had been fighting the Burning Legion for a long time. Not a single one of them wasn't exhausted. Archimonde was too cunning. He had taken advantage of this weakness of the Night Elves. An Abyssal Lord shouted, "I am XX," before the battle started. Then, like a tank, it charged into the formation and started a massacre until it was killed by Lord Howl or some other expert in the Alliance army. However, not long after, the portal opened again in the Alliance army's sight. An Abyssal Lord that looked exactly like the Lord that had just been killed laughed sinisterly and shouted, "I am XX back." Mortals couldn't possibly know that the souls of the killed demons returned to the twisting nether to be resurrected actually came at a high price. They only saw that they had terrifying enemies that could never be killed and would resurrect immediately after being killed. So, when more and more ferocious demon warriors with long fangs entered the battlefield, the morale of the elves collapsed. If it wasn't for the demigods of Azeroth acting together, such as Cenarius' father, Malorn the White Stag, as well as the remaining 4 dragons suppressing the enemy's air force, the battle would have been over 1,000 miles away. No, we can't go on like this. Our military strength isn't infinite. Even if we gather the combat power of the entire planet, we will still be exhausted to death. This wasn't just the thought of Cenarius, but also the thought of all the big bosses. What should we do? Even Malorn smiled bitterly. Maybe we can blow up the Well of Eternity and cut off the demon's entrance, Malfurion suddenly said. How? Everyone's eyes lit up. Soul of the Dragon. Malfurion spat out 4 words. But we can't find that traitor, Nisario. The Red Dragon Queen gritted her teeth. At this moment, Ronan suddenly interrupted, "No, maybe I can." What he took out was a black dragon scale that had crossed 10,000 years of time and space. Chapter 1057. When Ronan spoke, Alexstrasza wanted to say, "We can't wait to catch him and tear him to pieces, but that black dragon is so well hidden that even our own dragons can't find him." However, when Ronan took out the dragon scale, the 4 dragon kings were speechless. Of course, they recognized that it was something from the dragon race. The 4 dragon kings recognized at a glance that it was definitely Nisario's scale, and not another black dragon's. At this time, the blue dragon king, Malygos, stared at Ronan with bloodshot eyes. The entire blue dragon race tried to protect me, but they were annihilated. Even my spouse, Syndagosa, died in battle. Even so, I couldn't hurt that traitor Nisario at all. I couldn't even tear off a scale from that bastard. How did you do it? Ronan was speechless. Was he going to tell Malygos at this time that it was his master, who killed Deathwing 10,000 years later, who asked him to bring it here? Facing Malygos, who had fallen into a berserk state, Malfurion suddenly took half a step forward, blocking the line of sight of the Blue Dragon King and Ronan. "Get out of the way. It's none of your business here, little elf." Malygos glared at him. Malfurion shook his head slowly. He suddenly remembered many things. What he thought about the most was still nothing. The mysterious Void Lord who claimed to be Du Kong. To be fair, he was also angry because Du Kong had taken what he loved. However, he was helpless. The situation of the war was already in danger. If he did not do anything, the fate of the entire world would be irreversible. Before he was rescued by Darima, Du Kong personally told him that the key to turning the situation around was the soul of the giant dragon. He wanted him to find a way to reasonably let the soul of the giant dragon fall into the hands of his brother, Illidan. As for what that plan was, Du Kong refused to say. Malfurion did not know what his brother's plan was either. Malfurion would never easily trust Du Kong. He did not even dare to fully trust Roddick, who had made countless contributions but was extremely mysterious. After all, the humans on the Kalimdor continent were just a bunch of ignorant barbarians who didn't even have their own language. Whether it was Roddick or the mysterious female thief, they obviously came from a more civilized world that had a more systematic understanding and application of knowledge and power. Malfurion had made up his mind that he would study the dragon soul for a while before he decided to deal with it. In any case, the situation couldn't get any worse. Even without Sardra's arrival, the Allied army would be exhausted to death by the Archaran army. Taking a deep breath, Malfurion held his head high and looked at the sky. We actually have a top-secret plan, and many people have paid a price that even the dragons can't imagine for it. Am I right, Goddess Elun? That's right. The will of the moon goddess Elun descended. I believe in my child, she and he will not let me down. As a true god, the moon goddess Elun's words carried far more weight than those of the demigods present. Since even Elun was defending Malfurion and Ronan, although they didn't know what the plan was, and everyone's curiosity was about to explode, no one dared to interrogate the goddess if she didn't say anything. They could only bow in agreement. In the end, the anti-Burning Legion Allied army sent a small team consisting of Malfurion, Krasus, Ronan, and other mortal powerhouses to investigate Nesario's lair. While Nesario's body almost exploded from absorbing too much power, and he had no choice but to let the goblins inlay a large number of high-strength metal plates on his body to stabilize it, Malfurion successfully stole the dragon soul. No, it should be called the demon soul. He also discovered that the ancient gods who had once occupied planet Azeroth and plunged the entire planet into chaos and madness were the masterminds behind Nesario's betrayal. Enzos and the other ancient gods were only sealed deep underground when they were suppressed by the pantheon gods of creation. Unexpectedly, they also took the opportunity to stir up trouble. After Malfurion succeeded, he turned around and left on the spot, wanting to inform everyone of this shocking news as soon as possible. However, this very powerful team was ambushed. The combination of Illidan, Verosan, Azhara's guard captain, and the Eridar Gemini had successfully snatched the demon soul from Malfurion. While Malfurion was shocked, he also had the deepest fear of Dukong. This mysterious powerhouse had already planned everything. What could be more reassuring than snatching something from the hands of a mortal enemy? Malfurion was speechless for a long time as he looked at Illidan, who had fallen into a state of madness and had no idea that he was actually a pawn. After returning to Azhara City, Illidan saw the demon soul being held by the Gemini as they walked step by step towards the teleportation door at the top of the palace. Although he was expressionless, Illidan's heart was pounding. For the first time, he didn't want to hand the disc over to a demon. He knelt on the ground and looked up at the voluptuous and flirtatious Gemini. He gritted his teeth and said, "My lords, compared to you, I can use the magic in the masterpiece of the Black Dragon more freely. With the gift from my master, I now know it like the back of my hand." To strengthen his persuasion, Illidan lifted the hood over his eyes. The Eridar Gemini saw his eyes and couldn't help but frown. But who was the Gemini? Kil, Jaden's deputy, one of the most cunning existences among the demons, the Gemini smiled. "What you say makes sense, but it's meaningless. But our great Lord Sargeras is the true owner of the disc. Shouldn't he be the one to decide who uses the disc and strengthens the teleportation door here?" The Gemini's words made sense, and Illidan was actually speechless. Through the dark teleportation door at the top of the palace, the Demon King said loudly, "The existence that has the right to use this divine item can only be I." Even though he was even more unwilling, Illidan could only follow the other demon lords and bow deeply and kneel down. At the same time, in the distorted void, an incomparably huge rock the size of a moon floated there. This was one of Sargeras' palaces, and it was also the gathering place of the demon army that was prepared to follow Sargeras to teleport to Azeroth. There were thousands of levels in the huge three-dimensional fortress, and each level was at least 20 meters high. Almost every corner was filled with demons who were eager to fight. The total number of demons here was calculated in units of billions. Chapter 1058. This was a terrifying number. Unless a mortal stood tens of kilometers away, he wouldn't be able to see the end of this terrifying army even if he twisted his neck. Think about it. From top to bottom, from left to right, they were all huge, malevolent-looking demons. No matter how you looked, you couldn't see the end. How shocking was this? How terrifying was this? Back then, the Eridar Gemini had shown Tyrant such a scene, which caused her to lose control of her heart. If Duque hadn't used his authority as a lord to intercept Tyrant, she might have already fallen into the hands of some extremely vile demon lord and become a broken slave, or even be tortured to death. Obviously, Sargeras didn't even need to come personally. As long as these demons all threw themselves into Azeroth, they would be overwhelmed by their absolute numbers, be it dragons or demigods. Beside the mountain-like Sargeras, there was a floating magic platform in the air. After the seemingly insignificant Duque did a series of operations, he bowed to Sargeras and said, "Your Majesty, everything is ready." What appeared in front of Sargeras were 12 huge artificial satellites, each with a diameter of 100 meters. These magical creations were created by all the Eridar warlocks in a short span of 2 weeks. They were far more complex than any Eridar warlock could imagine. Sargeras had secretly ordered the Eridar warlocks to keep an eye on Duque, but the warlocks soon gave up. Their level of magic was too primitive. Duque had only used a few common magic formulae from the later generations, along with a bunch of side magic circles that were supposed to increase stability, but were actually used to confuse the line of sight. He was able to fool the Eridar warlocks who were in charge of inspecting the magic circles. This is fixed point strengthening. Magic will weaken in the air, understand? It won't weaken? Why can't your shadow arrow hit the opposite planet directly, but only 30 or 40 yards? This is an automatic control circuit. Once the magic node runs out of magic, this light will light up. Then we will replenish the magic here. Is this a magic ballast that can stabilize the output of magic power? As an engineering student who had studied automation, strong and weak electricity, Duque used a whole set of physics and engineering knowledge that could not be applied to the field of magic to fool people. Every time he tried to fool someone, he would be an idiot. Many Eridar warlocks even ran over eagerly to become Duque's disciples. Just bluffing wasn't enough. The Burning Legion was the most simple and violent place, and all that mattered was the results. Duque's dimensional gate was indeed effective. When Duque said that he was ready, Sargeras began to travel through the void and absorb mana from Azeroth's demon soul. Even though it was slightly contaminated, the dragon aspect's power still originated from the creation titans of the Pantheon. The power they used was completely different from the dark energy that destroyed life and extracted the power of the planet. This was a power that the Pantheon Temple had obtained after tens of thousands of years of traveling in the universe and modifying it countless times. It was the most suitable and widely used power for traveling in the universe. Usually, power would be greatly depleted after teleporting a short distance. But the power of Demon's Soul was different. Even if it traveled through the void for who knows how many light years, under the control of Sargeras's will, most of the magic was still injected into the 12 satellites that Duque had built. Although Duque wanted to name the 12 satellites Goddess of Twilight's Necklace, it was a pity that the domineering name Mjolnir's Hammer was more to Sargeras's liking. According to Duque's bluff, this dimensional gate was the hammer in Sargeras's hand, and he could smash it wherever he wanted in the future. The charging of the satellites that made up the dimensional gate began. The group of demons looked at the readings on the meter that Duque had personally built, and the percentage points rose one by one. After waiting for a full hour, the charging was completed. Duque said loudly, "It's done. Your Majesty." Opening Mjolnir's hammer will allow your Majesty to reach Azeroth with less effort. But the last layer of the planetary shield will have to be handled by your Majesty yourself. Open the gate. Sargeras's voice rumbled. After Duque recited a long and complicated incantation, the 12 satellites that looked like a necklace shone with a mysterious magical light. Soon, the light on the 12 satellites connected in a clockwise manner to form a complete circle, and then the circle drawn in the distorted void glowed with the unique light of the dimensional gate. Sargeras could tell almost immediately that this extremely huge dimensional gate that could accommodate him was better and more stable than any of the Burning Legion's portals in the past. Ha! Infernal affairs. You did well. In the huge fireball, a few boxes that emitted powerful magic waves passed through the void and flew directly in front of Duque. That was Sargeras's reward for Duque. Duque was like a hungry dog snatching shit. He rushed over and put away all the boxes without even looking at the surrounding demons. On the other side, in Azhar, Demon's soul floated in the middle of the well of eternity, shining with a dazzling light. In the deep hole formed by Sargeras's incantation, the power of the demon's soul and the well of eternity churned continuously, about to form a stable dimensional gate. The Demon King was in his terrifying world, preparing to enter this latest spoil of war. Soon, he would destroy all life in this world, and then he would destroy the next world with life. Apart from him, there were some special existences waiting expectantly. Their dreams were terrifying, and even more primitive than the dreams of the Demon King. They had waited for a long time to regain their freedom and take back what belonged to them. Every time Sargeras strengthened the dimensional gate, they were one step closer to success. With the help of the Well of Eternity, the Demon's Soul, and the powerful power of the Demon King, they could open a window to freedom in the eternal prison near Surlama. The allied forces that sensed Sargeras's arrival began to panic. On the ground, the demigods led by Malorn launched a fierce attack on the Burning Legion. At the same time, Archimonde also hoped to use a decisive victory as a gift for his master's arrival. As soon as the battle began, it directly entered the most brutal state. The wild boar demigod Igamagan slammed into two abyss lords, or sent them flying, or used his long teeth to pierce their bellies. But his huge size attracted even more firepower. Mother Shiraz's 6 evil scimitars slashed at him in succession, and the Doomsday Lord Kazak's shadow arrows bombarded him simultaneously. In the end, he couldn't hold on and died on the spot. Chapter 1059. This was true for demigods, not to mention the mortals. A large number of lives were consumed like ants. In this primitive and backward era, no one knew how many people had died except for the relatives and friends who were familiar with those who had sacrificed themselves. Perhaps the demigods of Azeroth could find a chance to revive in the distant future, but mortals were dead. The battlefield was filled with a tragic atmosphere. If not for the fact that the Burning Legion only wanted to kill and destroy, the morale of the mortals in the allied army would have collapsed. In the sky, the dragons chose to give it their all. No one can guarantee that the spy hidden in the Burning Legion, or Illidan's Stormrage, will be able to close the portal. We can only trust ourselves. Give it your all. We will close the portal with our own power. Alexstrasza encouraged the 4 dragon aspects, as well as the dragon assault team, Krasus, Malfurion, Ronin, and the others. This was destined to be a charge filled with pain and despair. The sky of Azeroth was filled with dark clouds. Unfortunately, the dark clouds were formed by the Apocalypse Guards that were hovering in the air. Archimonde had personally gone to deal with the strongest demigod, Malorn the White Stag. Those left behind in Azeroth were not weaklings either. For the army, Apocalypse Lord Mephistos roared. His huge claws fell from the sky, and the Apocalypse Guard army that was as dense as a swarm of locusts slammed into the Dragon Tribe's assault team like a huge wave. The 4 dragon aspects were undoubtedly the strongest in Azeroth. The strong bodies of the dragons, coupled with the power granted by the Creation Titans, made them very strong. However, the betrayal of the Wings of Death had extracted part of their souls and their power cores. Even Alexstrasza, who used life as her power core, was only left with less than 40% of her power from her peak. Facing the siege of dozens of Void Dukes of various sizes in the sky above Azhara City, even someone as powerful as them fell into a desperate and bitter battle. They could not even get close to the outer city walls of Azeroth. A single dragon breath could kill more than a dozen large Apocalypse Guards, but half a second later, more demons filled up the gap. They did not have the time to catch their breath at all. Giant dragons relied on their claws, mouth, wings, and tail the most. When Malfurion landed, he summoned a net of vines below them. Hardly had the experts been caught and the momentum of their fall slowed down when Azhara's counterattack arrived. Countless demon guards and hellhounds swarmed out of the city gate. On the tall city wall, the high elf mages and Eridar warlocks lined up neatly in 3 rows, showering the heroes with spells of all colors. "Follow me." Malfurion led the heroes into an enormous sewer that could accommodate 2 carriages at the same time. In the sewers that were not submerged, there was knee-deep black blood and a large amount of corpses emitting an unbearable stench. After Malfurion opened the gigantic alloy fence that had been enhanced by magic with a special secret technique, they had to endure the stench while they continued to charge toward the forbidden palace of Azhara. But soon, they were also blocked by the flood of demons that surged into the sewers. At this moment, in the tower next to the Well of Eternity in the center of Azhara, a bone-chilling roar suddenly came from the portal that Sargeras used. Even if they could not see it, anyone with the slightest magical sense could feel a terrifying storm brewing in the Well of Eternity. Obviously, that was the Burning Legion's unique demonic storm. Sargeras is about to arrive? Is everything over? Unable to hold it in any longer, Ronin directly used Arcane Impact and broke through the sewers that they had been proud of as a barrier. The heroes charged toward the ground in a suicidal manner and rushed toward the inner city. Suddenly, an earth-shattering roar came from the sky, even louder than the loud noises on the battlefield. Deathwing rushed in and descended from the stormy clouds in the sky. He charged straight toward the demon's soul that was floating above the Well of Eternity. "Mine. That's mine. You despicable thieves. No one is qualified to take it away from my claws." Deathwing obviously fell into a state of madness as he charged madly toward the demon's soul. Although Krasus and the others were full of anger and wanted to protect Deathwing who had betrayed the dragons, in such a situation, they had to shout in their hearts, "Well done." The Burning Legion was powerful, so the demon lords never cared whether their enemies were one or a group. Anyway, they were all guys that had to be dealt with. Only the most evil and powerful races that thirsted for destruction and destruction like them were qualified to join the Legion. Since they dared to steal from Nesario, they dared to face the revenge of the Black Dragon King. Balnazar, Malganis, Khazroga, and Croesus, the 4-winged demon lords, flew into the air. However, the 2 Dreadlords and the 2 Doomsday Lords were only in the air just in case. Boom! A huge 3-dimensional protective magic circle suddenly appeared in the void, and an evil yellow-green light bloomed, bouncing Deathwing away. Not only was it bounced away, but it also caused considerable counterattack damage. No, the Black Dragon once again rushed toward the magic circle that could not be passed through. His body continued to burst into flames because of his excessive strength, causing his body to crack. He had to use the armor made by the goblins to maintain his body, but now the counterattack of the magic circle had triggered his injuries. Obviously, the armor had not completely sealed the cracks on his body. His eyes were wide open, and he rushed toward the demon's soul with anger. He was so fast that Malfurion was dumbfounded. This time, there was a change in the magic circle. A cluster of green light that illuminated the entire world enveloped the entire black giant shadow. Nesario was tricked and directly suffered a big blow. He screamed and somersaulted at least 5 times in the air. Even the 4 demon lords who had been waiting at the side flew over together, ready to take advantage of the situation. At this moment, an accident happened. Deathwing's dragon blood sprayed on the ground. This was originally an inconspicuous thing. Obviously, the Burning Legion did not expect Nesario's dragon blood to be extremely corrosive. Unfortunately, the black dragon blood was poured on 2 of the 6 magic circle nodes, directly melting the Eridar wizard on the node into a pool of flesh and blood. The magic circle collapsed immediately. There was a big explosion. After a series of tremors, the existences of different factions were shocked to see a seemingly slender blue-purple palm grabbing the small demon's soul disk. That was blind, Illidan's Storm Rage. Chapter 1060. A few hours ago. It was a terrifying day, a dark day where the sun and moon couldn't be seen. Ever since Illidan suggested that he would give Sargeras the demon's soul, Tyrant hadn't been able to sleep. The few times she did, she would take a short nap out of exhaustion. On rare occasions, when she learned that Sargeras was about to obtain the demon's soul, she fell asleep. Unfortunately, she had a nightmare about the destruction of the world. When she woke up, she sensed a man's aura beside her. "Malfurion, are you here to save me? Or is it you, Illidan?" The prayers of the beauty were destined to go unanswered. Tyrant opened her eyes after passing through the hazy fog, only to see Duke. To her surprise, it wasn't Duke in his shadow form, but a completely normal Duke. Tyrant was shocked. If not for the familiar dark energy around him, she would have thought that he was a different person. Duque pulled Tyrant up and held her by the waist domineeringly. But it was this rough movement that gave Tyrant a sense of security from the familiar touch on her waist. It really was him. Du Kong could actually be considered as a handsome man. No normal woman would like to be wantonly possessed by a pitch-black humanoid creature. It was a terrible experience that challenged the limits of a woman's acceptance. From the initial anger and resistance, to numbness and acceptance, to the current acceptance, to the pleasant surprise after losing hope, Tyrant suddenly realized that happiness could be very simple sometimes. Duque smiled faintly. "Tyrant, thank you for your hard work. Today is the day that will decide our fate. I hope that you can come with me and witness the results of our hard work together in this period of time. This proves that all of our grievances and patience have paid off. This is not the will of the goddess. It is purely us." Tyrant's mouth twitched, and the muscles on her face twitched slightly. Her exquisite and holy face seemed to be telling Duque that she wanted to be happy, but was also afraid that she would be even more disappointed and hopeless later. It was this incomparably contradictory feeling that made her speechless for a long time. Tyrant was at a loss for words. "Come on." Duque did not explain further and entered the shadow form again. Just like that, he led Tyrant through various corridors and doors. The high elves and demons they met on the way all bowed respectfully to them. In their eyes, Duque was a rare, powerful, and intelligent technology-type lord in the army. She was different from those lords who only knew how to fight and kill. She was also different from those demonesses who only knew how to scheme but didn't have high combat power. For the time being, this infernal lord was irreplaceable in the army. Thus, even though they considered Tyrant to be the slave of the infernal lord, they didn't dare to slight her in the slightest. After arriving in the void, Tyrant saw Sargeras's gigantic and terrifying true form. She also saw Duke open a huge portal and teleport Sargeras to the space barrier of planet Azeroth in one breath. Even now, Tyrant still didn't understand what Duque was trying to do. Wasn't Duque still helping Sargeras descend? When Sargeras' mountain-like body disappeared through the void portal, Tyrant could clearly hear the cheers of the Eridar warlocks in Duque's control center. The demons were roaring, singing, and celebrating the fact that they were about to conquer and destroy a new planet. "Alright, you can all leave. I want to celebrate with my baby." Duque spoke in the Eridar language, which Tyrant couldn't understand. However, before the male Eridar demons left, they gave Tyrant an "we understand" expression. Tyrant's face heated up. Filled with a sci-fi feel, the metallic hall that could accommodate 100 people instantly became empty. None of the Eridar demons felt that there was anything wrong with Duque's order. Because Duque had already proven his loyalty to the army and had completed his mission well. The status that Duque enjoyed now was a matter of course. Tyrant braced herself and walked over to Duque's side. She knew that she couldn't defy Duque or Duque's divine sword. He wanted, at that moment. Duque gently hugged Tyrant and whispered into her long ear, "Now, it's time to witness a miracle. We have to conserve our energy because it's going to be dangerous." Duque snapped his fingers, and the huge screen in the hall projected a real-time image of Azhara's surroundings. Tyrant saw the battle between the demigods of Azeroth and the main force of the Burning Legion. she saw the demigod, Malorn the white stag, appear. As the guardian of nature, Malorn was known as the most powerful creature that walked on Kalimdor. He was one of the strongest creatures on Azeroth, just like the Dragon King. Guardian of the Way, Holy Spirit who protects all, Great Ancient Guardian. More than 10 titles and titles fully reflected Malorn's greatness. In the image, Tyron was shocked to see that Malorn had easily flattened an entire elite demon army of the Burning Legion in order to save his injured son, Cenarius. Archimonde had no choice but to appear to prevent the entire army from being destroyed by Malorn. The duel between the two powerhouses made Tyron think of phrases like, a duel between the strongest of two worlds. After the earth-shattering battle, Malorn, who had already been seriously injured in the previous battle against a large number of demons, was defeated by Archimonde the Corrupted. Although he had been evenly matched with the Demon Lord, Archimonde broke his neck. Archimonde won by a narrow margin. Ah! Tyrande cried in horror. Because the one who died was the spouse of the goddess she believed in, Duque could only comfort her. Don't worry, demigods can be revived. It just takes a little longer. Then, the image moved to the vicinity of Azhara, and Tyrande saw the allied army's surprise attack turn into a bitter battle. She saw Nesario's chaos and failure. In the end, the center of the image locked onto Illidan, who had obtained Demon's Soul. Illidan. No one knew whether Illidan had aimed for this opportunity long ago, or if he had just appeared there by accident. All they knew was that because of the magic circle's explosion, Demon's Soul had been blown away. Now, within 100 meters of Illidan, there was nothing that could stop him. If Illidan wanted to do something to the platinum-shaped Demon's Soul, now was the best time to do so. Brother! 800 meters away, Malfurion exclaimed in shock. Chapter 1061. For thousands of years, Malfurion rarely used this title to refer to his biological brother Illidan. At that moment, he wished that his brother was still the hero who fought for his people. He was not disappointed. Because Illidan shouted in front of everyone, Tyrande, do you see this? I'm about to become the hero of Azeroth. Wait for me. I will rescue you from the clutches of that infernal underworld demon. He was going to become the hero of Azeroth, not the hero of the Burning Legion. When he said this, it formed a huge contrast with his eyes that had been destroyed by Sargeras's blessing and the evil Legion runes that covered his shoulders. Great! What jumped out of Malfurion's mouth was exactly such a delightful word. For a moment, Tyrande cheered in her heart, even though she had always disliked Illidan's stubbornness. Illidan was a stubborn maniac who desperately wanted to prove himself. When he wanted to study under the demigod Cenarius, Cenarius found out that he could not calm down and learn the way of nature, so he rejected him. Feeling humiliated, Illidan immediately turned around and joined the Moon Guards. He used his identity as a Moon Guard to expose and prove the Queen's conspiracy. After the leader of the Moon Guards, Latuzius, died in battle, he took over the leadership of the Moon Guards. However, Illidan was still too radical. His mana burn often burned his fellow Moon Guards to death, regardless of friend or foe. This caused him to offend many of his comrades. Unexpectedly, in order to win, he would act like Du Kong. On the surface, he would side with the Burning Legion, but in the end, he would find a way to fight back. Tyrande was happy for Illidan. At least her childhood friend had not truly fallen. Unfortunately, Tyrande's happiness did not last for more than a second, because she immediately realized that Duque was too calm. That strange calmness was as if he was waiting to see Illidan make a fool of himself. Duque's behavior was like a bucket of cold water poured over Tyrande's head. In fact, Duque did not want to hurt Tyrande's feelings. He even hoped that Illidan would reconcile with Malfurion on the spot like he did in history. He wanted Illidan to cast the Demon's Soul and send the demons of the Burning Legion back home. However, dreams were always beautiful, but reality was always so painful. From the very beginning, Duque felt that something was definitely wrong when he returned to 10,000 years ago. With Nozdormu's violent and straightforward personality, He would never do something like throwing Duque into the ancient war to kill him. Therefore, Duque always tried his best to avoid fighting with all his strength. Sure enough, history books were meant to be torn. Right after Illidan's self-expressive, delusional speech, tragedy befell him. You really are a spy. Sargeras, whose true body was still outside the space barrier, roared angrily. Since Sargeras said the word sure, then he must have a backup plan. The stone under Illidan's feet was suddenly blown away. Even though Illidan was a master of both magic and martial arts, and had amazing dodging abilities, he could not avoid this trap that he had prepared for a long time. An extremely complicated, circular magic circle with a diameter of 30 meters suddenly lit up under his feet, and easily caught Illidan. Dozens of large and small demonic giant hands grabbed Illidan's hands and feet. They twisted his entire body backwards and lifted him high into the air. You're a lowly traitor. Do you really think that the demon's soul was accidentally blown to your side? I lied to you. Idiot. See, you've been exposed now, haven't you? One on the left and one on the right, holding the platinum disc from both sides. Of course, it was the Eridar twins. The figures of these two female demon overlords could be seen in almost every secret operation. On the side of Azeroth, almost everyone's heart fell to the bottom. Even Duque's heart skipped a beat. As expected, history had changed greatly. In a world where one traveled through time and time again, any small change in history could lead to the death of an important historical figure, and thus change history greatly. However, Duque did not move even though Tyrant, who was in his arms, had begun to tremble. It was Duque's calmness that affected Tyrant. On the other side, Sargeras's voice came again. Give me the demon's soul. I have no time to care about a little bug that is destined to be destroyed along with this world. Yes. The Gemini twins smiled. They were very happy. They had helped their master's master at a crucial time. After this, they would definitely be rewarded handsomely. They were already looking forward to what kind of reward they would get. Something shocking happened again. The demon's soul, which was supposed to fly back to the center of the Well of Eternity under Sargeras's power, suddenly fell to the ground. It wasn't just the platinum disc. Even Illidan, who was in the air, and the Eridar twins, who were less than 30 steps away from the disc, knelt to the ground involuntarily. It was gravity. An unimaginable gravity. 50 times. In just a few seconds, with the platinum disc as the center, everything within a radius of 500 meters was surrounded and dominated by the arcane magic circle that shone with azure light from the deeper underground. A large magic circle that was obviously part of the Forbidden Palace of Azhara overpowered the Gemini's magic circle and controlled the entire scene. Even the magic that Sargeras sent from the teleportation portal was forcibly dispersed by this even more domineering force. Who is it? Who's behind this? Suddenly, the ground at the center of the magic circle opened up. It was a relatively narrow circular area, with a radius of about 5 meters. An unexpected person appeared, Queen Azhara. She was as elegant as ever, and her appearance was perfect. Surrounded by a few personal guards and 2 maids, she slowly walked up the spiral staircase and stood still. Then she raised her head and puffed out her chest. Facing the direction of Sargeras's will, she said something that would make anyone's balls ache. Sargeras, do you really want to marry me and make me the queen of the Burning Legion? Let me share your power and glory? Everyone who heard this was dumbfounded. Most of them only knew that it was Queen Azhara who single-handedly attracted the Burning Legion, but no one knew that the queen had such an idea all along. Different races. Different styles. She actually wants to date? Everyone's reaction was one word: dumbfounded. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.